in Barnet. They suffered stab wounds in the attack and are now being looked after in hospital.
We need to make sure that when people carry out these activities, they feel the full force of the law. People think they can get away with this. The person who firebombed a few weeks ago is out on bail. That's not full force of the law.
This crisis, it's a crisis for all of us. It's not enough to simply say we stand with Jewish communities. Of course we do, but we must show it and act it. And the responsibility lies with each and every one of us, because it is our fight too.
Let's stop importing people from countries where anti-Semitism is the norm. And if our London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, in his infinite wisdom and belief in diversity, thinks that's the sort of diverse view that it's OK to have on the streets of London and the police don't get involved, don't be shocked, and don't you bloody dare claim to be shocked or upset or care about Jewish people being stabbed on the streets of our capital city in broad daylight. This is on you.
You keep getting proven right every single time. Jews are not safe in this country.
Well, absolutely. No one can be surprised or feeling shocked that this happened. No Jew certainly is. I mean, we had Zach Balansky last week saying this was just a perceived threat. Well, we can see this isn't any perception. This is real. This is happening on the streets. This isn't just an anti-Semitic terror attack. This is an attack on Britain, on the Western liberal democracy and values.
The first politician that uses the word shocking, I might just go and throttle him, because this is anything but shocking. It's the most expected thing is almost overdue, if you ask me, because, I mean, I just left Israel last week. I thought it would be the last time we were woken up by explosions, but clearly not.
The Jewish community is our community, and their safety is our safety. And we have to make it absolutely clear, robust, strong leadership, and this has to stop, because otherwise it's almost being normalised, and it's terrifying, and we're sick of it. Enough's enough.
Our plan is a complete step change in how we protect communities, moving beyond piecemeal responses to a sustained nationwide effort, one that ensures that people across the United Kingdom can live freely and without fear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Shall we do this? Three minutes past 6, top of the morning. Happy Friday, one and all. Mark Dolan on Talk Breakfast. Get the kettle on. We've got work to do. Breaking this morning, Andy Burnham confirms he wants to be Britain's next Prime Minister, throwing down the gauntlet to Sir Keir Starmer if he wins the Makerfield by-election. We'll bring reaction from across the political spectrum. Can Andy Burnham transform the fortunes of this country if he achieves power? Is Burnham the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, the fallout from the Henry Novak murder continues apace, with the war of words between the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage worsening. Well, that is the topic of a special Dolan's Dispatch at 9 a.m. this morning. You won't want to miss it. Plus, shamed Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor potentially pocketed millions by subletting the Royal Lodge. Plus, what is the truth around the large bruise on his face? We've got the inside story. And my question to you this morning is a very simple one. Is British policing broken? I make no apologies for, once again, discussing the appalling tragic murder of Henry Novak and the police's horrific handling of that arrest in that lad's dying moments. I make no apology for talking about it. Because the Prime Minister may want to sweep this under the carpet and say nothing to see here and talk about division. Prime Minister, it's your policies which are causing division. So we are going to talk about it, and that's my question to you this morning. It's about the culture of British policing. Do you still trust the cops? When you see an officer walking down the street, when you see a cop car, do you really feel they've got your back? Is British policing broken? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note and let's talk. Will you take a look at my team today? Rory is taking your calls. 0344 499 1000. The brilliant Sam is our lead engineer. I've never sounded better. Directing our TV output, it is the fabulous Nahar, so you can hear the show on the radio. The DNA of the Talk brand is, of course, in radio, but now it's a TV show as well. And you can watch my guests and watch Dolan's Dispatch, all on YouTube. Just head to YouTube, put the word talk in there, or Talk TV, either works. Hit search, and up we pop. And the boss today, our brilliant executive producer, Alicia, who, let me tell you, is not taking any prisoners this morning. No pun intended, as we're talking about law and order. What do you think, folks? Is British policing broken? 0344 499 1000. Let's get to work. Well, I hope you're very well on this Friday morning. I'm here to get you up and started with your busy day ahead. Perhaps you're just kind of having your first coffee of the morning. You might be on your way to work. You might be getting the kids ready for school, ironing the uniform, that sort of thing, preparing their packed lunch. Or maybe you're at the tail end of a night shift yourself. If so, I salute your contribution to the unstoppable machine that is the great British economy. I've got to tell you that I had the great privilege of hosting Kevin's show last night, the Drive Time show, 7 p.m. And then I was here until around 9 in the evening. And I left and I said goodbye to the security team here at this building, who are elite level. I mean, forget about the FBI or the SWAT team, because the security at Talk Towers is elite level. And I said goodbye and good night to those folk. I came in this morning, they were still here, because that is what Alarm Clock Britain looks like. Because there are millions of people in this country who work very hard, who put more in than they take out, who are doing overtime just to keep the lights on. And those are the people that we passionately support, that we love, that we should look after, that should be love bombing. We should be love bombing businesses as well, because they're the ones that employ people, pay their taxes, generate national income, and reduce the burden on the state. What has this government done? The complete opposite, where they're love bombing the public sector with inflation-busting pay rises and clobbering businesses. Make it make sense. Let's do the papers. The Daily Telegraph. Andrew cashed in with secret rent deals. How do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? What a creep that man is. What a strange specimen. Driving in his Range Rover on the Sandringham estate without a care in the world. There's you and me, worried about the credit card bills and the mortgage and the rent and the extraordinary cost of food in the supermarket, while Andrew Mountbatten Windsor cruises around a royal property, very relaxed in a pink shirt, probably been riding his horse, maybe doing a bit of shooting. Oh no, they're taking a gun off him, haven't they? But he's got this big fat shiner, this bruise on his face. Now, that could be any number of ex-girlfriends. I think it's Fergie. I think Fergie's giving him a slap. Or is it self-harm? Who knows? But I'd like answers as to why he's got a massive bruise on his face. And I'd like answers as to why he subletted the Royal Lodge for years, potentially making millions. This stinks. And this damages the reputation of the royal family. A fresh headache there for King Charles. White House rebukes Number 10 over two-tier policing in Novak case. This is fantastic. This story's made my day. The White House, who, by the way, care more about Britain than Number 10. Let that sink in. The White House care more about Britain than number 10, which is the building where the Prime Minister lives, which should be the focal point of the British national interest. It ain't. What does number 10 represent now? It represents the Chagos Islands giveaway. It represents the self-destructive policy of net zero, which is effectively economic suicide. It is the building, number 10, that represents an open borders policy. What's the point in having a government if they don't police the border, if they don't generate cheap energy, if they don't create a business-friendly environment? What is the point in a government that has a police force as one of its agencies that discriminates based on colour? It's a hot mess. So the White House and the President, Donald Trump, do you remember him? Donald Trump, he's a real estate entrepreneur, quite a personality. He's got a very sort of orange hue about him overall. And he's more of a British patriot than our own Prime Minister. You heard me right. Donald Trump cares more about Britain than Keir Starmer. Yes, he does. Prove me wrong. Trump cares more about Britain than Starmer. He does. He cares more. It's not even his country. The guy's got no skin in the game, very orange skin. Trump's got no skin in the game, but every so often he'll say, it's very sad what's happening to the United Kingdom. He said, you've got to stop this immigration, otherwise you won't have a Britain anymore. That's correct. That is true. You won't. He said, you've got to drill for oil and gas. You've got the most beautiful oil, the best oil ever, he said. It's such good oil. Why don't you drill for it? I don't understand. We should have cheap energy. You cannot have a successful economy without cheap energy. And here's the great irony. Net zero has come from the woke metropolitan left, who claim to care about working class people. Net zero is a catastrophe for the poor and for the working classes. Why? Well, because it kills manufacturing, because manufacturing requires cheap energy. So that puts lots of manual and skilled labourers out of work, which is not good. And of course, it makes life miserable for poor people who are having to pay more at the pump for their petrol and having to pay more for their energy bills. Net zero is extraordinarily bad for the working class and the poor. So Trump says you shouldn't have open borders. Why aren't you drilling for oil and gas? And why are you giving away territory like the Chagos Islands? In fact, Trump has blocked that. Trump has stopped it. So we've had an intervention from the leader of another country to preserve the British national interest. The US president is stepping in and helping us against the wishes of a prime minister that wants to give away the Chagos Islands and have you and me pay tens of billions of pounds for the privilege. Anyway, the White House has stepped in again. This is wonderful. They've demanded an end to two-tier policing in the wake of Henry Novak's murder. Is that not amazing? That the White House are having to intervene in regard to British policing. We've got a Prime Minister that says there's nothing to see here. Move on. You're stoking division. No, we're not. You represent and have spearheaded policies which create that division. In an intervention that will fuel a growing rift between Number 10 and the White House, the US State Department said the case was a symptom of civilizational decline that must be rejected across the West. Ideological conditioning and two-tiered policing are glaring symptoms of civilizational decline. A statement read, they must be rejected across the West. The United States sends our condolences to the family of Henry Novak and the people of the UK at this troubling time. Just amazing. America's worried about Britain. You're worried about Britain. I'm worried about Britain. The Prime Minister couldn't give two figs. Why? Because he is a technocratic globalist who cares more, as a former human rights lawyer, about people that have entered the country illegally than the folk already here. And by the way, I'm talking about our multi-ethnic population. This is not skin colour. Let me tell you that Brits of every religion, of every race, of every skin colour are furious and heartbroken about what is happening to the country. All Brits. We are a successful multi-ethnic society, and that multi-ethnic society ain't happy and change is coming. Daily Express, Kate shares in mum's joy, and it's revealed that the king is paying Beatrice and Eugenie's rent. The Sun newspaper, what a bloody cheek, as Andy shows mystery bruise, ex-Duke of York pocketed Royal Lodge cash. Daily Mirror, Andrew and family rake it in, what a cheek. We've got the Times here, Andrew cashed in with Windsor Cottage sublets. What a wrong 'un. What a piece of work old Andrew is. Stabbed teens' parents call for common sense policing. Thank you. Thank you. This is very valuable, an intervention by the parents of Henry Novak. God only knows what they're going through and will be going through for the rest of their lives. It's unimaginable. I've got skin in the game because I have two boys of a similar age to Henry. So, I mean, it was painful for all of us to watch that body cam footage. And when you're a parent and you look at a lad like Henry, and that could be your boy, it hurts even more. And the parents have said we need common sense policing. Now, that is code for policing which is not ideological, for policing which is colour blind. That's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch. It might get me cancelled. Good. I hope it does, actually, because the best things get you cancelled. The truth gets you cancelled. But what's amazing about this magnificent network is that you won't be cancelled here because it's the home of common sense and the home of free speech. Dolan's Dispatch at 9, don't miss it. I plan to challenge Starmer for leadership, confirms Burnham. Daily Mail, Beatrice and Eugenie have lived at palaces rent-free for years. Sounds like they are as much of a pair of grifters as their parents. The Guardian, Burnham, I won't flinch from need to fix the broken social care system. Yeah, I won't flinch from indulging my ambitions politically. That's what you won't flinch from. Police force data refutes anti-white bias claims. Wonderful gaslighting from The Guardian, who are telling you not to believe the evidence of your eyes and your ears. Police force data refutes anti-white bias claims. It's actually sick, isn't it? These people are sick. Of all the weeks to gaslight the public, the I paper revealed King's private concerns over Trump state visit to the UK. There you go, stirring the pot. Thank you very much, the I paper. And finally, Daily Star, cheeky rent deal, grand old bruise of York. I'm taking your calls this morning. Is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? When you see someone walking down the street, an officer, or you see the blue lights and the cop car, have they got your back? Do you still have confidence in the British police? Do you still trust them? Is British policing broken? 0344 499 1000. Let's take a cheeky voice note from Nick.
Good morning, Mark. No, I no longer trust the police. All our good coppers have long since gone. The Peter Blexleys and Mike Nevilles of this world left the force because they saw no future. All we have now is the product of a left-wing sausage machine that the police force has become. It's now merely an instrument of a Fabian state.
Nick, thank you for that. Is British policing broken? More front pages in just a moment. 6:18, this is Talk Breakfast.
I'm angry, Julia.
The family are angry. Everybody who has seen that video or even heard the story understandably will be angry. But the job of politicians is not to tell people, go out and be angry. People have a right to protest. I think that actually people coming out and showing solidarity with the family, showing they're upset about it, sends a signal to political leaders. What it shouldn't be is us whipping up people's rage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sharon in Staffordshire has messaged the show. Good morning, Sharon. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. It is 6:21. Mark, I'm sick of the Prime Minister and the MPs and the royal family taking the pee with the British people. What a bloody cheek they all are. They are corrupt. We need to get rid of all of them. There is a genuine sort of now antipathy towards the entire establishment, isn't there? That is quite clear. This from Cliff. Good morning, Mark. Most police officers are decent people. However, there seems to be a lot of groupthink at play. It seems to go up the ranks. You must go along with the woke agenda. I don't like the military black and high-vis uniform. I prefer the old blue one. I don't like the casual use of mate rather than sir or madam. I think that's a really good point, Cliff. What about this? Nigel in Brighton. Good morning, Mark. Just checked the BBC News app. There's nothing on the very extensive homepage about the Henry Novak case or Donald Trump's statement about two-tier policing. Well, you're so right, Nigel. Of course, establishment media, these brands, they're not interested because they don't care about the British people. They are just protecting some broad, horrible narrative that, frankly, is damaging the country. It is 6:22, live in the studio, the brilliant Benedict Spence. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning.
So, it's official. Andy Burnham has said the true bit out loud. He wants to be Prime Minister.
How about that?
It's not a very well-kept secret.
Yeah, nobody saw that.
Now, of course, we won't go into the details of the by-election because that's being hotly contested as we speak. I'll do the candidates in just a moment. But what I do want to ask you is whether he would be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer.
No, he wouldn't. That's not me simply being dismissive for the sake of it, although that would be kind of easy to do. The difficulty that he has is the same difficulties, actually, that Keir Starmer has. He has the same party that he's inheriting. He has the same people who are opposed to the sort of reforms that need to be made in order to fix many of the structural issues that Starmer also faces and that successive Conservative Prime Ministers also faced. He's not somebody, I think, who has the vision or, frankly, the will or interest in doing those sorts of difficult things. So will he make a better Prime Minister? I think he's better on camera. But that doesn't make a better Prime Minister. Everybody remembers how well that went for, say, Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak. Did it make things better for them than it did for Theresa May or Liz Truss? Liz Truss is a bad example, but still, did it actually improve things? No, not necessarily.
So, a lot of people say that Andy Burnham is better at politics. He's probably a better communicator, isn't he, politically? But is that the equivalent of lipstick on a pig?
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where people go, oh, he's better at politics. And you think, well, what does that mean? The whole business of politics is, in fact, to enact change and to govern. It is not spin and stories and an image. I know that that's part of how it is that you get there and you stay there. But the key thing, and it does often feel as though a lot of politicians in this country have forgotten about that, the key thing by which you are measured is your success, your ability to actually do things that improve people's lives. What we've had is several decades now of politicians who don't seem to understand that think that spin and cleverness is at the heart of everything. They believe that they are living in an episode of The Thick of It or The West Wing, depending on what day it is. And what you get is the sort of the end result where things, fundamental things, break down, complex systems break down. But they all talk about how clever they are. That doesn't sound like good politics to me.
There is such a focus, isn't there, on optics, on speeches, on slogans. I've got a three-word catchphrase for you, which I think sums it up. It's policy, stupid.
Yeah.
It's the things that the government do. And there's no clear evidence that there'll be a major policy shift under Prime Minister Burnham. So, for example, he's going to preserve Shabana Mahmood's efforts to double the length of time that you achieve indefinite leave to remain. He's going to stick with the fiscal rules. He's going to try to, you know, have a country that lives within its means. There's nothing he said that sounds any different from Starmerism.
Well, he's saying these things, but we also all know that they're lies. They're not true. I'm going to stick within the fiscal rules. I'm going to make sure that the country lives within its means. The country isn't living within its means, and actually the current government has shown no interest in trying to get us to a point where we are living within our means. We're still borrowing colossal amounts of money. There's no effort to slash the biggest drags on the public purse, which, you know, one of which, of course, is welfare, which in fact they've increased. They've made it harder to create wealth, harder for employers to create jobs. They've made it far easier for them to, in the short term, take money out of the economy by increasing people's taxes, and then they spend it on things that are economically, you know, non-functioning, pointless. And I know that lots of people will say, well, yeah, it's harsh to say that these things are pointless because you have to pay for people. You have to pay for people who are on welfare, on benefits. But that's the end result, is that you need to make sure you have enough money to prop those people up. And you get that through wealth creation in the economy, and they're not doing that.
Well, my producer, Alicia, has sourced a clip of Andy Burnham speaking on the Question Time programme last night in regards to his wider political ambitions. Take a listen.
I'm not somebody who gets ahead of myself. I can't do anything unless I'm lucky enough to get the support of people here. But if I get your support, I would seek to represent you at the highest possible level and give this constituency maximum power and influence. I think Wes Streeting seems to have launched a leadership contest, so if that is running, I would seek to join it.
I don't know why he's dressed as a manager from the Championship, but good luck to him. It's a different look, black jacket, black jumper. He's trying to do a different kind of politics, but again, it's just spin, it's just optics, isn't it?
Yeah, it's window dressing. It's not very good window dressing at the end of the day. I mean, the thing is, you know, we've been talking, there's been a lot of talk around Westminster about whether or not there might be some benefit to him calling an early general election. I actually happen to think that there's a lot to recommend that for Andy Burnham.
I agree.
But he's not going to do it,
Because why? He's just got no courage?
Well, right now, I think that, yeah, that's ultimately what it comes down to. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if actually he changes his mind once he gets in, if he gets in, and has a look at the situation and then thinks, oh, this isn't brilliant. But I think from where he's currently standing, he's probably not going to do it. But, you know, the thing is, where we're currently sat, it's about 3 years until a general election. If he says there's not going to be a snap general election, that means 3 years of him grinding on and trying to talk a good game whilst physically not being able to change anything. That means he's out of office in 3 years' time. On this current trajectory, it doesn't matter how good a talker he is. He's not going to be able to talk his way out of, you know, Labour's current polling long term over 3 years. Short term, he might get a huge polling bump. He might be able to say to people, listen, the failings of the current government are the failings of Keir Starmer's alone. We're drawing a line in the sand under that. Give us a second chance. Trust us, it'll work this time. Maybe enough people buy that. Maybe enough people are spooked by the prospect of reform. Maybe reform themselves are not currently ready to quite make, you know, that step. Maybe they don't have all their candidates sourced. Maybe they're not quite in an election footing. That would be, for me, the moment to go to, you know, take that opportunity. And what it also does is, because he would almost certainly still lose a huge number of MPs, even if he had a good election, he'd lose a great part of his majority. But in doing so, he potentially loses lots of the troublesome MPs who are currently stopping him from doing anything.
Bingo.
And it really incentivizes those who remain afterwards. He can turn to them and say, look what happened with your messing around, with not pursuing things, not changing anything. This is your future. You'd better back me on this.
We have a perverse scenario, which I believe is unprecedented, which is Starmer's big majority is a problem that his majority is too large and making it difficult to govern, which I never thought would happen.
Well, I'll actually say this for Starmer. I don't think he expected to be Prime Minister now. I think he thought he had another 5 years. I think he thought this coming general election in 3 years' time was going to be the one. I don't think he thought for a second the Conservatives would set fire to their own credibility quite as quickly as they did. Nobody could have seen, well, in his position, nobody foresaw COVID coming, for instance, and that's what I think started a lot of the sort of the tumble with Boris Johnson. Because Boris Johnson was doing incredibly well, even sort of in the midpoint of COVID. You know, a lot of people were prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. It was just that continuation of mishaps and missteps.
Boris was flying before COVID.
He was doing incredibly incredibly well. And if you were in that position and you were Keir Starmer, there was no way, with the party coming off the back of Jeremy Corbyn, that you were going to sit there and go, oh yeah, I can win in 5 years. He had, I think, a longer-term plan of about 10 years to detoxify the party, to rip out all the rotten stuff. Yeah, and to get his people, his kind of MPs who would back him into those kind of seats. It was a bit nefarious, but, you know, he got a few in at the last general election. There were a few notable ones, but it was far, far away from being that sort of clean sweep that he needed. And now he's stuck with the leftovers of a party that he only got about a third of the way through rebuilding, I think.
Well, that's a very interesting theory on your part, and therefore you might say that it was only sort of mid or late 2023 when he suddenly thought, crikey, I might win this. And that wasn't long enough to create a plan for power, which I think has played out based upon the problems they've had. Now, Andy Burnham is a number of things, but he's not stupid. So why would he want this top job if he wasn't going to turn things around for the country?
I think everybody wants the top job who goes into politics because they do, well, they start off believing that they can change things. The problem is that in order to survive in the party system, you have to be a party man, and that's as true for the Conservatives as it is for Labour, and it is also true for Reform. I know that people would like Reform to be different, but I don't see any indication that Reform is going to operate on a different kind of spectrum. They have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do that, and I don't think they're going to. But you have to basically kowtow to those higher up. You have to be a yes person. Once in a while, you get a character who can sort of blitz their own path, but that's very, very rare. And Andy Burnham is not that person. He's been around politics for far too long, I think, to be idealistic in any way. Yeah, and I think once he gets in, the tricky thing is once you get in, you want to stay there. You don't want to risk anything. One thing you can say, I have a lot of criticisms for Margaret Thatcher, but one thing you could say about Margaret Thatcher was she was not afraid to upset people and potentially therefore risk her position. She was rewarded, in fact, for that by the electorate over several years. But it did for her in the end with her party, because if you upset the party too much, well, those are the people that'll come for you. But I think people like Burnham, as clever as they are, I don't think that they quite have the gumption to tell the country what needs to be said. And we saw this actually with Starmer. Starmer at the start said when he got in, straight off the bat, he said it's going to be a difficult 5 to 10 years, things aren't going to get any better. And then actually, rather than push through with serious reforms, he rode back because he realised, oh, people might not like me for a bit. This is going to be a tricky job. I think a lot of it comes down to that. And of course, not to bring it always back to him, that was Boris Johnson's big failing. He never wanted to tell people the difficulties. He never actually wanted to do the hard part. He just wanted people to like him. That, I think, is the most emblematic example of where our politics fails.
The White House have demanded an end to two-tier policing in the wake of the Henry Novak murder. Here's a voice note from Steve on that very issue.
Morning. I think I've got a great idea. I think what we need to do is sack all of the police, sack all of the chiefs, and basically re-employ all ex-military, ex-army, ex-navy, ex-MPs of the army. Would be fantastic to take up the mantle of our police force.
Steve, thank you for that voice note. Keep those voice notes coming. We love the voice notes on breakfast because we know you're very busy on a Friday morning. So what you do is you call 0344 499 1000 and you wait for the end of the message and then bang, smash it out. 30 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever you've got, because I really want to have a simple conversation this morning and ask you, is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? Do you feel safe in their hands? Have they got your back? This is Talk Breakfast, 6:33, more to come.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this from Vicky. Good morning, Mark, and hello, Benedict. I haven't trusted the police for a while now, but even less since the Southampton protest. I saw them grab a man to the ground, crowd around him and keep kicking him in the head. He was standing against a fence doing nothing. The footage is all over X and the government and the police haven't even bothered to comment on it. You've sent us the footage on X. Vicky, thank you for that. I'll take a look at that. And that is a real worry. Now, let's have a look at the list of candidates for the Makerfield by-election. It reads as follows. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, Labour. Dan Clark, Libertarian. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling Loud Hope, official Monster Raving Loony Party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU. And Michael Winstanley, Conservatives. So, Benedict, a big new development, and this is somewhat significant for number 10. The White House has rebuked the UK over two-tier policing in the Novak case. The White House has demanded an end to two-tier policing in the wake of Henry Novak's murder. In an intervention that will fuel a growing rift between number 10 and the White House, the US State Department has said the case was a symptom of civilizational decline. Your reaction?
I think that the White House takes every and all opportunities to hit the UK because actually it's a very bountiful target, if you like, because actually the UK, because of its current trajectory, is always going to have incidents where the Americans, especially on the right, are able to use to whip up their own base as an example of how they're doing things correctly and how we aren't. Ultimately, I think that, listen, I do believe that there's two-tier policing. I think we all saw the footage. We all understand what we mean when we say two-tier policing, that actually the system is broken and it is deeply biased against
And we have a long
people.
list, don't we? Manchester Arena, grooming gangs, Axel Ruder Cabana, the list goes on.
The difficulty is, and this is a slightly frustrating aspect of it, which is that actually in this country Donald Trump remains actually pretty unpopular. Elon Musk is also not that popular. Regardless of what they achieve, they simply aren't particularly well thought of by the British public. And my worry is always when those two weigh in on things. As much as I may agree with or disagree with, but as much as I may in this case agree with them, you just sort of sense that when Donald Trump says something about two-tier policing and the UK not doing particularly well, the attitude of the average British observer might be to actually go, well, whatever to you. What's it got to do with you? I don't like you very much. And so it's sort of, if you like, it creates a sort of a siege mentality where the attitude is rather than go, yeah, there are problems with policing in this country, or yeah, there are problems with whatever it is Donald Trump has highlighted that day. It's actually to go, well, what's it to do with you? And actually to sort of push against it. And it helps Keir Starmer. That's the thing. He actually, as much as he feigns outrage whenever Donald Trump or Elon Musk say something, he loves it because it whips up his own base as well because of that level of animosity.
Well, I do agree, although I think there's a difference between an angry rant from Donald Trump on Truth Social and an official post from the venerated department, the US State Department itself.
Yeah.
I mean,
British observers don't distinguish between the two because they'll look at the State Department and go, who's that staffed by? It's Trump appointees. So it's the same with ICE. ICE is not some insane paramilitary organisation. It's a long-standing part of the US security apparatus. It's been in existence and utilised by the likes of Barack Obama, Joe Biden and Bill Clinton to much greater effect than it was ever used by Donald Trump. But if you were to ask the average Brit what is ICE, they would probably have incredibly negative connotations of it and probably link all of that to Donald Trump. That's the reality, and that's, the prism through which a lot of British observers view America.
Well, none of what you've said is wrong, but I'm very happy with the dispassionate tone of this post. Let me read it out to you in detail and in its entirety. This is from the US Department of State, and it reads as follows. Ideological conditioning and two-tiered policing are glaring symptoms of civilizational decline. They must be rejected across the West. The United States sends our condolences to the family of Henry Novak and the people of the United Kingdom at this troubling time. I'm just grateful that this administration is calling out two-tier policing. I'm glad this administration has said you need to tackle immigration or you won't have a Britain anymore. I'm glad that this is a US administration that's calling out the suicidal madness of net zero. Yes, there are constituencies politically in this country who will close ranks as a result of Trump's intervention, but I'm grateful for it anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with anything that was in the statement, frankly. And you know,
I think it's a beautiful statement.
What I'd also say, it's very heartening to know that administrations can be voted into office despite the massed ranks of opposition to them by establishment, media, organisations and politicians and NGOs to prevent them from doing so. It's nice to know that it is possible, even though we were all told Donald Trump is a fascist and he's tried to overthrow the Republic and XYZ, that the average American voter can still look at him in the round and go, yeah, but I prefer him to the guy who can't remember his own name. That was, you know, that was a reassuring thing, and it does give you some hope that there can be a degree of change in the UK. The problem is things just move so much more slowly in the UK. Actually, it's harder, I think, to unravel what has been done by the myriad different systems in this country. So whilst it's a good thing that it's being recognised, it's a good thing, actually, that they're talking about it, it's still being done in another country. It's being spoken about in another country, not in this one, and this is the one where it matters.
Yes, and of course, I know Trump is not probably the most appropriate standard bearer for the British national interest. What I do think, though, is that his pronouncements over several years are going to age well. His remarks about immigration and European identity, I think, are going to age well. His remarks about energy supply and the North Sea, I think, are going to age well.
Yep.
And now these remarks about two-tier policing, again, I think will be proven right.
I think the best example is to look at his previous comments on NATO and specifically about Germany and its dependence on Russian oil and gas and how that would be used by the Russians to hurt Europe in Ukraine. And everybody laughed. And you remember, don't you?
2018,
when that footage of those German officials laughing and everybody else laughing, and it was on, have I got news for you? And everybody go, oh, what an idiot he is. And then, oh, it happened. It happened in a bad way, and Europe is still trying to muddle its way out of that situation. So if he gets nothing else right, he certainly got that right, and that's a big enough call to go, maybe he has a point about other things.
Donald Trump has an uncultivated, chaotic wisdom.
Yeah. I think that's actually a pretty good way of putting it. He goes on instinct, I think. And, you know, he's the New York property developer tycoon sort of thing. Listen, there's all sorts of stories about things that he's got wrong in the past, but everybody seems to forget. It's from your mistakes and the things that you get wrong that you tend to learn in life. Donald Trump has as many losses as he has wins. He's learned a lot over the years. He's got a good nose for these things. He wouldn't have become president twice if he didn't.
No, it's just about the hit rate, isn't it? Woody Allen said, if 51% of your jokes make people laugh, you've won.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think it's the same in business, potentially the same in politics. Let me tell you, you're right about 58% of the time, so you're home and hosed, Spence.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
You're good.
But, you know,
you've got a buffer.
But I think in politics, and I suppose, therefore, in political journalism, everybody's career ends in failure. So at some point, it has to dip into that 49% bracket, at which point you're out. The second you go below that 50% mark, you're out.
You are never in the 40s, and you've got quite the most splendid buffer. Ruby is in Salford. Good morning, Ruby. Welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning, Mark.
What a treat to have you on the show. Now, listen, what's happening in Salford this morning? Have you had your first cup of tea?
I have, yes, love. Thank you.
That's good. And is it what gets you up so early on a Friday morning, Ruby?
OK, I just want to speak about this attack on this young gentleman.
Of course.
But I will forget if you interrupt me, so I just want to get it all off. And
I will not say a word. Ruby, over to you.
OK, thank you. I don't think there's anything racist about this, actually. I think this is one bad apple from the Sikh community, and there are bad apples in every single walk of life, every single religion. Sure. You know, there are horrible people in everything.
100%.
I think, and the condolences to the family, of course. I think it's not even political, this. But I will just quickly say, the sooner that the Prime Minister goes away in short jerking movements, that would be really excellent for everybody. But the thing is, this poor lad, the police are at fault here. Really, really at fault.
Correct.
They're meant to, no fear, no favour.
Bingo.
They're not supposed to have political alliance. They're not supposed to have groups. Rip those rainbow. Nothing against GBQ. They need to not have that on their uniform. They are meant, and take them from the police service back to the police force, because when I was a child in the 80s, I was born in 1975. When I was a child in the 80s, if a policeman walked past you, it was just like, even if you'd done nothing wrong, it was like, thank God I wore brown.
100%.
So there need to be we need a force that isn't the army. I mean, bringing the army in is last level stuff, and that's like, they've got better things to do. They're protecting the world, not just, us on the streets. And the saddest thing is that, this family of this person, this maniac, if I'm not talking too much out of turn, that has bad apple, that has killed this poor lad.
Yeah.
His family have supported him in that, and that's blood thick and water thing. That'll happen everywhere. I don't particularly think it's a racist attack. I think it's a maniac that needs taken off the streets, and thank goodness he has been. But what I will say is the police, they're meant to do a quick recce of what's dangerous.
Yeah.
Even if you're a St John's ambulance first aider, which I am, I'm not saying that's, the police. I wouldn't be in the police force if you paid me, or a teacher nowadays. But they should make a quick recce of everything. Am I in danger? No. Is this? And they should have asked that poor kid, this 18-year-old kid. There must have been blood coming out of if he's been stabbed in the lung and stabbed in the back, he must have been coming out of his mouth.
Well, Ruby, I have to say that I'm not sure that was the case, but it was clear that he didn't need to be handcuffed because he was lying prostrate on the floor. He posed no physical threat to anyone. Yeah. And like you've said, and on yesterday's show, I spoke to several first aiders, including somebody that teaches first aid, Ruby, and they said that the police didn't even cover the basics of first aid, let alone cuffing this guy and letting him die.
No. And also, if you restrict somebody's arms, it restricts the lungs anyway.
Oh,
so what they've done is exasperated the issue there.
And Ruby, just briefly, if you can then, what is your main takeaway from what happened to Henry? What is the lesson to be learnt?
Oh, well, the politicians will say there's lessons to be learned. We sorry, thoughts and prayers, blah, blah, blah. I think what is to be learned is that the police need to get back to basics.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like Gene Hunt out of Life on Mars, and the Sweeney and things like that. I mean, it just protect and serve without fear or favour.
Ruby, so well put. Really enjoyed our conversation this morning. Go and have yourself the second cup of tea of the day, and do join me again in the near future. We've got more front pages to come. A question to you this morning that I want to put. I want to have this conversation. Is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? Do you feel they've got your back? 6:49, Talk Breakfast.
the House of Commons and the House of Lords held a minute's silence for George Floyd. I'm asking all politicians to go to the Speaker because I think we should hold a minute's silence for Henry Novak. Do you agree?
Well, if we believe in equal treatment of people, and if we believe that people who are being held down and cuffed by the police say, I can't breathe as they die, then we absolutely have to.
One final question, Nigel. Would you take the knee for Henry?
No, I don't take the knee for anybody. I'll stand and bow my head.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 6:52. Do you still trust the British police? Have the cops got your back, or is British policing broken? Roger in Wales says, I think Novak's murderer sentence would be easier to swallow if whilst he's in prison he sees his actions have caused his family to be deported. I welcome the input from Donald Trump. If you're just joining us, the White House have slammed Britain's culture of two-tier policing. Dave says we need the Americans to help highlight to the rest of the world how this government are using every tool, including two-tier policing and ending of jury trials, and soon the Islamic blasphemy law. And all of this will further shut down voices against this two-tier government. I'm going to get to your voice notes in just a moment. We've got some front pages. Daily Telegraph, Andrew cashed in with secret rent deals. Then Prince paid peppercorn rent fee for Royal Lodge, but let out surrounding cottages. White House rebukes Number 10 over two-tier policing in Novak case. The Daily Star, cheeky rent deal, grand old brews of York. The I newspaper revealed King's private concerns over Trump's state visit to UK. The Guardian, Burnham, I won't flinch from need to fix the broken social care system. Also in The Guardian, police force data refutes anti-white bias claims. The police force accused of anti-white racism after officers' response to the murder of Henry Novak is more than 5 times as likely to subject black people to a stop and search as white people, according to the latest figures. The racial disparity in the Hampshire force is higher than the average for England and Wales and has worsened in recent years. Folks, what do you think about this? Is British police broken? Pat is in Bournemouth. Good morning, Pat.
Mark, it's a pleasure being on.
Well, thank you, Pat. Pat, do you live in Bournemouth?
Sort of just out. I'm just north of Ringwood, so I'm in a little town that's near the forest and the New Forest.
Nice part of the world.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, lucky you. Well, listen, Pat, what do you think about this? Do you still trust the cops? Do you have faith in them?
No, not at all. I'm 57 years old. I grew up in London. We always used to have one eye on the back of us, making sure if we were doing anything wrong, we'd be collared. Next thing you know, be in the police station. Next thing you know, be in the courts, and you'd be dealt with. It was always without fear or favour. Nowadays, it just seems to have been turned on its head, and the police are now policing with fear or favour.
I think that's very hard to disagree with, Benedict. What do you have to say to Pat?
It's interesting, isn't it, talking, especially with the article, as you just read out on the front page of The Guardian, that suggests that actually police in the local area couldn't possibly be involved in two-tier policing because they arrest, what was it, 5 times? They stop 5 times as many black people to be stopped and searched as anybody else. And you just sort of sit back and you think, well, this is the kind of the desperate state of affairs that we're in, where we're sort of leaning back on, oh, well, the police disproportionately target black people, and this shows, therefore, that there is no two-tier policing. That's not what we're talking about at all. We all saw the footage of Henry Novak and the police arriving on the scene and the interactions with the family. That was nothing to do with stopping and searching. That was taking two conflicting bits of information, one person making an allegation of attempted murder and the other one making an allegation of racism, and the police prioritising the allegation of racism over the allegation of attempted murder, which is insane. To then say, but the police stop and search, you know, however many black people, so that shows that they're not, you know, biased against white people, well, that's nonsense, because ultimately, if what they're going along is descriptions of people that they're actively looking for anyway, and say, for instance, you know, Pat, you were saying you're originally from London, well, we all know actually where a huge number of the gangs that organise across the UK are based, and what kind of ethnic demographic they make up. You know, it's not actually, you know, a refutation of talking about two-tier policing. To say, oh, well, they disproportionately target people who actively fit the profile of gang organisations. And it's when we see, things like the Henry Novak case, and then we hear that kind of dishonesty in the press, you know, with the collusion of The Guardian in this case, that most people do sit there and go, well, I don't trust the police actually to act with fear or favour at all, because we've seen in front of our own eyes what it is they actually do. And on top of that, we know that people will run cover for them when they do that, because there are journalists in this country for whom that fits their ideology. It's not even just the police that you don't trust, it's the media to cover it as well.
Exactly. It's not exactly the police on the ground's fault. It's what's come down from this new college of policing, a lot of things that they're told to do, how to act. And it was like, when it was a police force, we didn't care if we were black, white or anything. It was like, if we were doing something wrong, we would get arrested. And that's the end of it. If they're doing stop and search, well, they stop you, search you, got nothing on you, on your way. Doesn't matter what colour you are. It's if you've done something wrong. And that's how it used to be. Now it's, I don't know, it's like everyone's working against us.
Most definitely. Pat, brilliant call. Do join me again soon and have a lovely morning in beautiful Bournemouth. Let's take a voice note from Tony if we can.
Is policing broken in the UK? It's not policing, is it? It's the government. All the orders come from the top down. The CPS follow the guidance. This terrible woke ideology, race critical theory, is indoctrinated from the top downwards. It's in the schools, it's in the colleges, it's in the universities. The youngsters are brainwashed. The police are brainwashed. It's everywhere.
Tony, you are so right about that. Thanks for a great voice note. You sound busy in your vehicle. What you've said there is very much the basis of today's Dolan's dispatch. All of our public institutions have been infected with this leftist woke ideology. It's damaging our economy, it's damaging our society, and it's now proving to be dangerous and in some cases fatal. Woke is literally killing us. We've got a very big hour to come. Your calls, some top guests, and a simple question. Is British policing broken? This is Talk Breakfast.
The video footage was so deeply shocking, the behaviour of the police disgraceful and stupid, and it shows something deeply rotten in our society.
Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives.
Nigel Farage said today it should be white lives matter. Are you making the same point?
It should be everyone matters.
And when you hear Henry's faltering voice, losing its tone, losing its volume as his life ebbs away, you're not going to say, I don't think so, mate. And when somebody tells you they've been stabbed, your first job as a police officer is the preservation of life.
Henry was pulled across the gravel, his hands forced behind his back, and he was placed in handcuffs. Instead of being treated as a dying victim, police formally arrested Henry for assault and read him his rights. That was the last thing he heard.
I do want to address the Henry Novak case and what has happened since I was on air yesterday. Because after his son's murderer was sentenced on Monday, Mark Novak said of his son, "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone." Since then, Nigel Farage, the Tories and pretty much everyone else, people like me, we're all being accused of stoking that very division, hatred and tension that Mark Novak talked about.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 7, Talk Breakfast. Top of the morning, happy Friday, one and all. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm Mark Dolan. A big show to come. And in the worst kept political secret ever, Andy Burnham has revealed that he wants to be our next Prime Minister. He's thrown his hat in the ring and thrown the gauntlet down to Sir Keir Starmer. But would he be an improvement on the incumbent? Meanwhile, the fallout from the horrific murder of Henry Novak continues apace, and the war of words between the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage worsens. And my question to you this morning is a very simple one. Do you still trust the cops? Do you have faith in the police? Do you feel when you see a cop car or an officer walking down the street that they've got your back? Is British policing broken? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Or leave us a voice note. And lovely Jane has done just that. Do you still trust the British police? Is British policing broken? Take a listen to this.
Morning, Mark. No, I don't trust the police anymore. And that has taken every ounce of sadness to say that. I have come from a group of friends where people are police officers, that the partners are police officers. I actually tried out to be a police officer. So I respected the police. I did. Now I don't. I'm sorry.
Let's take another voice note. This from Tony.
British police broken. It's been broken since they've actually reduced all the police forces throughout the whole country. I grew up in a small village in Norfolk and we had a village copper that everyone knew. No crime, no nothing. Now, if we need the police, they have to come from at least 30 miles away, don't know any of the locals, turn up and just give you a crime number. What's the point in trusting the police these days? They don't even do their job.
Tony, thank you for that. Do you still trust the British police? Is British policing broken? Let's get the views of broadcaster and journalist Benedict Spence and a very old friend of mine, Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois. Hello, Mark.
Good morning.
It's a difficult conversation to have, isn't it? Because we know how hard our cops work and they place themselves in harm's way on a daily basis. But there seems to be a problem within the culture of British policing.
But my big brother, Brian Francois, was a copper for over 30 years. So that's been in our family. And I've traditionally always been a strong supporter of the police. But I have to say, Mark, I thought that the way Nigel handled this was wrong. The father of Henry Novak has been incredibly dignified. And he's called for common sense policing, which I think we would all instinctively agree with.
Is that not code for colourblind policing?
Well, I think the law should be applied equally regardless of a race, colour or creed. I think 99% of the people in this country would agree with what I have just said.
Sure.
But the grieving father did make a very public plea for no one to exploit this situation. And he wanted to lower tensions despite, you know, the horrific loss of his son. Nigel did the opposite. Nigel knew exactly what he was doing. And the reason he did it was because the Cameras returns in the Makerfield by-election were not going Reform's way. They were losing supporters to Restore. And so I think Nigel did that partly, at least, to try and, quote, shore up his right flank. He's been a friend of mine for years. When I remarried 4 years ago, I invited him to my wedding as a personal guest. I've known Nigel for a long while because of the Europe issue. But I must be honest, on this one, I think he got it wrong.
However, Nigel is not the story, is he? The police are the story, and an incredibly partisan response to what happened to Henry.
I was in the House of Commons when Nigel raised this again deliberately at Prime Minister's questions.
Good for him.
Well, but it's the way that you do it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't discuss this horrific murder. I think we absolutely need to learn lessons from it, and so do the police. But what I'm objecting to is the way in which Nigel did it and the language that he used.
Now, of course, you're entitled to that view, Mark, but surely your ire should be focused on the Prime Minister, who was deafening in his silence in regard to what happened for days and days and days. And once he did speak, he talked about people stoking division. It was the usual Starmer hand-wringing and a clear message, nothing to see here.
Well, as you know, I'm no fan of the Prime Minister. But I'll tell you who I've got a real beef with, and that is Zia Youssef, who loves to tell us all he is Reform's head of policy. This is what he tweeted at the weekend. I will quote it. Recent events demonstrate why I view the Tory and Labour politicians who created the burning injustice of modern Britain as traitors to their country. Now, my father was a D-Day veteran. He fought Nazism on D-Day. I deeply, deeply object to being called a traitor by anyone, least of all by Zia Youssef. And as he loves to tell us, he is Reform's head of policy. So presumably what he says is the policy of Reform. I'd like to know if Nigel Farage regards me and my colleagues as traitors.
Well, you're no traitor, not one bit, Mark. In fact, you're an extraordinary patriot, which is why we love having you on the show. Your reaction, Benedict Spence, to what Mark Francois has had to say. They're very critical of Reform's response in the aftermath of the Henry Novak murder.
I mean, I'll start by actually talking about the family and what it is that they said and what they put out. Because whilst we all understand that it's a deeply upsetting and deeply emotional time for them, and we want to respect their grief, families of victims do not get to dictate public discourse on things that have a profound impact on the safety of the public. And I think that it's actually pretty shameless, pretty callous of Keir Starmer to have taken his cue to say, well, nobody should talk about this because the family don't want you to make it worse. Rhiannon White's mother, her daughter was obviously murdered. She did not sort of come out and say after the fact, I don't want there to be inflamed tensions or anything like that. I'm not going to go into what it was that she said. But, you know, it's not as if Keir Starmer turned around in the aftermath of that murder and said, Now, we have to respect the dignity of the family, and they don't want anybody to talk about this because that's not what happened. And I think that in itself is political opportunism. That's Starmer and other people turning around and saying, please, nobody talk about this because it reflects badly on us and we think it'll make the situation worse. And I think that it's really cowardly to simply say, well, the families say we can't talk about it and we shouldn't inflame it, so we shouldn't. On the subject of reform, specifically, they are, I think, definitely leaning into this quite hard. And I think that that's partly because they are a little bit spooked. I'm still talking. And I think that actually it's a little bit because they are a little bit, you know, frazzled by what's going on in the by-election, and they're looking at what's happening with Restore. They are definitely, I think, spooked by that, and they understand that there's a good chance that they might not win a seat that actually they'd been thinking this is a really great opportunity to give the Labour Party a black eye. They fear, obviously, that Restore leans much further to the right than they do on social issues, and that it's very effective at tapping into certain senses of animosity and anger about that sort of thing. So I understand why Reform are actually thinking we have to really go hard on this because we need to get above that noise. But I think that that says two things. One, that the noise is already there. I don't think Farage is whipping this up. I think that he's simply sort of jumping on the coattails of it. But it does show, I think, that Reform are, we were talking earlier about not quite ready for a general election. I think that's a real sign of immaturity. I would agree with Mark that not necessarily that it was sort of morally wrong to do so, but politically I do wonder whether it's the smartest move. It doesn't make them look as if they are entirely in charge of everything. And I would say, actually, on the topic of calling people traitors, that's just the sort of thing that I think would put off a lot of average voters, middle-of-the-road voters, who, let's remember, Reform do need to win those over if they're going to start actually making headroads at a general election, say.
But why, Mark, are we talking about Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage and not Keir Starmer, who, in my view, Mark, is gaslighting a nation?
Well, I'm not a Starmer fan, and to be clear, I never said we should not debate and learn lessons from this horrific murder. My point was about the tone in which we do it. But coming back to Youssef, I mean, look, Mark, you said to me a number of times, we've debated this several times, about whether there should be some long-term relationship between the Conservative Party and Reform in order to prevent another very left-wing government in this country.
Sure.
We've debated this several times. I've always said I didn't think so, but I was still kind of open-minded about it. And I've always said that Nigel had a right to be very annoyed by the fact that Boris Johnson never thanked him for standing down his candidates in Tory incumbent seats. And so I hope I've been consistent in that approach. Right, thank you. If for those people who would desire that outcome, Zia Youssef makes it virtually impossible. Why would any decent politician with any sense of self-worth want to go into some kind of alliance or agreement, or call it what you want, with a party whose official head of their policy publicly calls you a traitor? Why would anybody want to treat with people like that? Don't ask me again about cooperation with Reform while Zia Youssef is still their head of policy. Just not interested.
Mark, will Andy Burnham be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer if he gets into number 10?
Well, it could hardly be a worse one, but having read his book, Head North, the one he wrote with Steve Rotherham, the City Region Mayor of Liverpool in 2024, I read that book last year. Burnham is a proper lefty, and he's pro-PR. He's pro our rejoining the EU, although he's desperately trying to row back on that now because that constituency voted broadly 2-1 to leave the EU. So he's definitely trying to be all things to all men. On the subject of defence, which you know has always been close to my heart, and foreign policy, Burnham's got hardly any track record. He's a bit of a blank sheet of paper there. So I worry that he wouldn't be properly committed to the defence of the realm.
Well, it's a deep worry, isn't it? I just wonder, Benedict, where what you're going to get with Burnham is slightly better politics, slightly better communication, effectively lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, I don't think that what Burnham is offering necessarily is radically different to Starmerism, and perhaps he's just not saying what it is that he is offering because he doesn't want to spook the horses. I think we have to remember he's done an awful lot to try and placate the bond markets because everybody was terrified that actually there'd be a bit of a crisis with financial institutions because they'd think, oh, here comes Red Andy Burnham, he's going to borrow a lot more and borrowing costs are going to go up. So, yeah, is that actually going to improve the state of the country? You know, I take the point. He says it can't go much worse, fair enough. But we all said that about Boris Johnson, and you know, that went spectacularly badly wrong in a very short space of time. So never say never. But if I could, I don't know how much time we have. Mark,
all the time in the
Mr.
world for
Francois,
Spence.
you said that sort of the famous line when we were talking about the Henry Novak case, which was lessons must be learned. I'm really curious to know, because this is not, you're not the only person to say this. What are the lessons? If you could give us 3 lessons, perhaps there aren't 3 lessons, maybe there are only 2, but if you could give us like some top lines of what the lessons actually are, I think people would actually appreciate it. When we hear politicians, because Starmer says there's a lot, lessons will be learned, and you think, but what are those? And actually I think what would probably make people feel a lot better about the direction of politics is if people did tell us what those lessons should be. I mean, would you have any off the top of your own head? What would those 3 lessons be?
Well, OK, there's an IOPC investigation underway, but we'll have to see what that concludes. But I don't think we can't say anything at all, because that could take months. I think the lesson came from Henry's father. I think the essence is when he said we need to return to common sense policing. And how would I try and define, say, I agree with they're an Essex family. I don't know the family personally, but they come from about 50 miles up the road from my constituency. And I offer my sincere condolences. I think perhaps the lesson we need to learn is what I said earlier, which is that we need to apply the law equally, regardless of the creed or colour of the people that live under it. I think it is true that if you look at the College of Policing, which is the sort of police equivalent of a military staff college, there's definitely been a lot coming out of the College of Policing in recent years that some people might describe as woke. And I think that we need to go back to first principles. And I think your viewers would want the law applied to them regardless of the colour of their skin. And so that, for me, it would be the overall lesson, subject to anything else that comes out of the IOPC investigation. I hope that's not an unreasonable thing to say.
Well, let's take a voice note, if we can, Mark and Benedict, from Tracy. Take a listen to this.
When we were young, we were taught to, if we were in trouble, we were taught to go to a policeman. That's what your mum and dad told you when you were little. If you needed help or you were frightened, seek a policeman out and he will help you. Now, personally, I wouldn't trust the police to tell me the correct time if I asked them for it.
Wow, that's damning. Thank you, Tracy. And how about this from Paul?
I'd love to be able to tell my children to trust the police. One of my children wants to be an officer, and you know what? He's not corrupt enough. The corruption, the incompetence, no. What I've seen and how they treat people and how they chase targets rather than do proper policing and look after people. Nobody I know trusts the police anymore, and we're not criminals. We're just disappointed in the service and the kind of people that seem to be joining the police force. Well, there's a theme, isn't there? Sadly.
Gentlemen, closing thoughts. Please react to that, Mark.
Well, my reaction is policing has become more, if you like, technocratic. And because of that, it's becoming I think some people regard it sometimes as more remote. Labour's plans to regionalise our police forces, I think, would be going in exactly the wrong direction. Those forces would then become even more remote.
Yeah.
But hang on, there's another side to this story. You know, there is a national policing memorial in this country to all of those officers who were murdered in the line of duty. A number of police officers have been killed defending the public and trying to uphold the rule of law. So your voice note caller there that implied all police officers were corrupt, if I were the wife of or husband of a police officer, and every time they go out to work in the morning, they don't 100% know if their loved one will come home that night or if they will have been seriously injured or killed in the line of duty. They're one of the few professions in this country, along with the military and the other emergency services, who sometimes get abused for their jobs, who literally risk their lives to protect the public. So before we start slagging off coppers left, right and centre, I'd just like to say there's another side to this story, and these people put on a uniform and literally risk their lives to protect us. That doesn't mean they're above criticism. That doesn't mean they never get it wrong. And sometimes where things have gone wrong, they've been, bad decisions by very senior officers. But it looks as if in this case the coppers on the ground got it wrong. But I don't think it would be fair or reasonable, therefore, to tar all police officers across this country with the same brush. That's my point.
Benedict, your reaction to those voice notes and a growing dismay at the culture of British policing?
Yeah, I'd echo the sentiment that actually I don't think people join the police with the intention of not being good at the job. What I would say is that an awful lot of people in the police are not good at the job, but that's not necessarily their fault. If you join up for one thing and then slowly the role morphs into something else that you're not necessarily particularly equipped to do or trained to do or, supported in doing, then that's not entirely your fault. The thing is, and I know we don't really have enough time to properly get into this because I'd like to ask Mark a few more questions on where he stands on actually how it is that we should return to the traditional standards of policing in this country. But ultimately, my view on all of this is,
well,
it's
I could
probably
give you an example. If we have time, I could give you an example.
I mean, how much? I don't know. Well, I'll just finish what I was going to say, which was that ultimately, when it comes to institutions that are, in the position that they are, and the police are in a pretty bad state of affairs, and the College of Policing, I think, bears a great deal of responsibility for that. Very often, actually, it's impossible to completely change these things in a short enough space of time. The police force is something that you need to be working and operational pretty much immediately. Otherwise, you get into a situation like the one that we currently have. People aren't turning up to burglaries. People aren't getting issued with the sort of support that they need. And what I wonder is if maybe actually we're beyond the point of reform. Maybe what we actually need is the establishment of an entirely new police force. And if that means ultimately that you set up something new, train that up whilst this thing is currently undergoing, and then you slowly transfer powers away from the first one. Other European nations have multiple different police forces for this purpose. Maybe it's time to start looking at that as a solution.
Mark, 30 seconds. Give me your blueprint for British policing.
The Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, he took over a force that was in pieces. He issued an edict the day he took over that on the following Monday, all officers would turn up wearing their uniform immaculately with polished boots and shoes. He's totally turned Greater Manchester round. They're now a very effective police force. They pioneered a thing called the Forcer Protocol to help prevent veteran suicide. So much of this comes down to leadership. We need good chief constables and we need more of them.
A quick word on the woke stuff, Mark.
Well, again, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, I'm sure, has been called many things, but I don't think anyone's ever called him woke, at least not to his face.
Mark, we always love having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. You've got us off to a cracking start this Friday morning. My thanks to Mark Francois, who is the Conservatives' Shadow Defence Minister and, of course, Conservative MP and an absolute favourite here on Talk, Benedict Spence. Benedict, thank you so much. We know you're a busy man running off to another network virtually as we speak. So much more to get through. Is British policing broken? More to come. It's 7:24. This is Talk Breakfast.
I'm angry, Julia. The family are angry. Everybody who has seen that video or even heard the story understandably will be angry. But the job of politicians is not to tell people, go out and be angry. People have a right to protest. I think that actually people coming out and showing solidarity with the family, showing they're upset about it, sends a signal to political leaders. What it shouldn't be is us whipping up people's rage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast, 7:27. A big reaction to my interview with Mark Francois, Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Secretary. Great show, Mark, says Warwick in Devon. I used to have respect for Mark Francois, but not now after his snidey comments about Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Well, we have a developing story, and it's the White House who have stepped into the row following the tragic murder of Henry Novak. This is the US State Department, and they've posted the following on X. Ideological conditioning and two-tiered policing are glaring symptoms of civilizational decline. They must be rejected across the West. The United States sends our condolences to the family of Henry Novak and the people of the United Kingdom at this troubling time. So that is the White House now intervening in this row, very worried about two-tier policing and linking it to what they call civilizational decline. Let's get reaction from the founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. Good morning, Harry. Really good to see you. Welcome to the show. Your reaction to this intervention from the White House?
Yeah, I agree with them entirely. It's an absolute tragedy, isn't it? That they can see from the other side of the Atlantic what's going here. Normal people in this country can see what is going on here. It's only our politicians, the woke left, and chief constables themselves who are in complete and utter denial. We have, without a shadow of a doubt, two-tier policing in this country, and we've had it for many years now. It is corrupting our police force. Your former guest was talking about how police officers join the police with good intent. They join the police because they want to catch burglars. They want to do the right thing. But then the College of Policing and individual forces, DEI officers, get hold of them and they squeeze out every last vestige of humanity and common sense so that they believe in racism and the accusation of racism. They prioritize that over a white person literally bleeding out at their feet. It takes a special kind of inhumanity to act like that. So this has to change. What I would do, I would start off with every DEI program in the police force in this country. And what I would be doing is I would be treating them as a dangerous organization, an organization that is spreading a dangerous ideology. And I would prevent the anti-terrorist unit knock on every single DEI door in every single police force and start doing an inquiry into them, because they are spreading hate, they are spreading ideologically damaging material, they are being incredibly divisive, and they are a danger to our country. We've been saying for a long, long time now that unless somebody puts a stop to this, it would lead to a tragic death. And lo and behold, we have one. I imagined that somebody would be so disturbed by the actions of the police that they would commit suicide. I did not imagine this absolute horror show that we have right now. It's gone way beyond anything that I can imagine, and it has to stop.
And not only did the officers who handcuffed Henry Novak after he was bleeding out of his own body, as you say, not only was it highly inappropriate to handcuff him at that point, having spoken to experts in the field, the cops didn't achieve even the basics of first aid. So blinded were they by this so-called anti-racist ideology.
That's exactly it. The first principle you were talking about before, about the first principles of policing. Principle number one is the preservation of life. That's it. Principle, the detection of crime comes way down the list. And you've got somebody there who's saying, I've been stabbed, I can't breathe. They're bleeding all over the floor. And your concern is that, oh, they might be a racist. Come on. To have got yourself into that state of mind. Those guys did not join up to become like that. They've had their humanity squeezed out of them. They've had their hearts and minds filled with this ridiculous notion that the number one priority of policing is to enforce anti-racism, regardless of the cost.
Harry, what happened with those cops and Henry Novak? It wasn't a mistake. This was what they were trained to do. They were doing their job. This was policy.
Well, it wasn't policy for it wasn't specific policy for them to ignore a dying person. That wasn't the policy. Right. But the policy was that you prioritise accusations of racism above all other things. So when they have a choice, when there is a dark-skinned man wearing a turban here saying that person over there, that white boy over there is a racist, all other concerns go out of the window. That's what happened. They cannot see literally the victim in front of them because their minds are filled with this anti-racism doctrine. And we have to get rid of this. I see Donna Jones. Donna Jones is one of my favourite PCCs, the PCC of Hampshire. She's absolutely wonderful. And she's called for HMIC inquiry. From what I'm hearing, the person who's going to be running this is a woman called Michelle Skier, who is ex-Cumbria, and she's as woke as you like. This is a little bit like asking the editor of the News of the World to conduct an inquiry into phone hacking. I really, really worry about this. Now, if we can just take the sort of Millie Dowler analogy a little bit further. Everybody knew phone hacking was going on. We could see it a mile off. But it took the death of a beautiful, innocent young girl called Millie Dowler for us finally to sit up and take notice. And it brought along the Leveson inquiry, and things changed. What I hope is that Henry Novak's death has the same sort of effect, that it leaves the same kind of legacy, that finally we can no longer turn our eyes to what is going on and go, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, it's been right there in front of our faces all this time. And I hope that the legacy of Henry Novak is that things change and change quickly.
Most definitely. Briefly, Harry, what's your appraisal of the Prime Minister's handling of this tragedy?
Well, as usual, it's absolutely useless, because where the police see racists everywhere, Keir Starmer just sees the right wing everywhere. We've not only got two-tier policing and two-tier Keir, we've got two-tier grief as far as Keir Starmer is concerned.
Wow.
It's quite okay for you to go out and riot and throw bricks through the windows and pull down statues over the death of a black guy in Minnesota. But if a bunch of kids are killed in Southport, you've got to keep it calm. You've got to be sensible. You can't stir up the flames of the right wing. If Henry Novak is dying at the foot of a police officer, the message is absolutely the same. This two-tier grief narrative is absolutely appalling. And Keir Starmer, if he's not careful, he is going to inadvertently fan the flames of riot in this country. I do not support that at all, but you cannot tell people they are not seeing what they can clearly see and then tell them to behave calmly and rationally when they know that you are lying to them.
The Prime Minister has spent all his time attacking Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is not responsible for this tragedy.
No, he's not responsible for this tragedy. But again, our politicians are far more concerned about the response to an atrocity than the actual cause.
Harry, they don't want us to talk about this. The message is clear from Number 10. Nothing to see here. Same as the grooming gangs. Same as Axel Rudikamana. Same as the Manchester 2. Same as the Manchester Arena and Salman Abedi. The list goes on.
That's absolutely right. They are terrified of the response to tragedy. Now, when the tragedy suits them, they're all over it. They're taking the knee. They're doing their hashtags. They're doing all the rest of it. But if it doesn't suit them politically, then of course they get all serious about it. They're trying to calm natural emotions down. When you say that I am boiling with white hot anger, they say, oh my goodness, that's because you're a far-right fascist, not because you're a normal human being acting as normal human beings react when they see the innocent slaughter of people, regardless of colour. I remember it's not too long ago when when the whole Black Lives Matter thing was going on. If you had the audacity to do hashtag White Lives Matter, you were investigated by the police for stirring up racism. Well, hold on a minute. Do white lives not matter? It seems as though they don't, given the response that we had from the police down in Southampton. It takes a special kind of ideological Nazi to behave like they did. And I don't blame individual police officers so much as I blame the DEI departments and the chief constables that are turning good people into complete and utter monsters.
Ideological Nazis, two-tier grief, a devastating assessment from Harry Miller. Harry, thank you so much for your important contribution to the show. Harry Miller is the founder of Fair Cop, I should say. What do you think? Is British policing broken? This is Talk Breakfast, 7:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
More scandal around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as the Daily Telegraph newspaper report that he cashed in with secret rent deals at the Royal Lodge. Let's get reaction from our fantastic royal correspondent, Rupert Bell. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
Fantastic to see you. What's the story here, Rupert?
Well, the story is that in Royal Lodge, which he paid a big sum when he moved in, and yet with the cottages associated with Royal Lodge, he was then able to charge a rent. Now, we don't know how much, and that he was actually then getting the rent coming directly to him. Now, the whole thing is a bit of a mess, really, when it comes to Royal Lodge, because what he did is he took out a long lease on the property, where, as a result of a large sum of money that he paid to move in there, and then as a result, he then paid a peppercorn rent. We don't know exactly how much, but a very one that was basically, he was almost living free of charge. And then he was getting the income from these cottages. Now, what was he charging for that? It may have been that these cottages were used for staff that he had working for him. So they would probably be set at not a market rate, but of course he was getting the money directly coming to him. But it takes on a wider significance because then there's also, at times, he was paying the rent for his daughters who were living in royal household properties, again at a reduced rent. And one of the reasons that coming out in this report is that they pay a reduced rent because there's only certain type of people can go there with security clearance. So therefore they don't pay market rate. So it's a bit of a cloudy area, really, the whole thing. But again, it sort of puts into question Andrew's finances and his financial arrangements. But this report does then go on to talk about other members of the royal family and their rental arrangements. And it also refers to William, who is now paying over £300,000 in rent to live in Forest Lodge.
Now, Rupert, it's priced in that Andrew is a figure of disgrace within the royal family, but could this be damaging to Beatrice and Eugenie, his daughters, who hitherto still remain within inner royal circles, and it's my understanding will likely attend Peter Philip's wedding? So is this going to be a problem for Beatrice and Eugenie, do you think?
I think that their whole setup is being questioned. But the king is now paying their rent to stay in the royal household. And you say, well, why? Because they're both working royals,
with rich husbands.
With rich husbands. They're doing normal jobs. One of them is a property developer. Jack Bogbach is, I think he's involved in the drinks industry and various things going on in his life.
That must have caught your eye, Rupert.
Well, Mark, less of that.
I'll pass you his number. He's got some good contacts.
Okay, I'll keep out of the Gaucho Club. Last time we were on it. Anyway, but anyway, we move on. But the point is, the royal family are now trying to make sure that their sort of living arrangements is squeaky clean in terms of the way they operate. Because, of course, it does. People say, well, if the royal family can live there for free when most of others are paying rent or it's not a good look. So I think this is important. And William is very keen to make sure that everything is above board and they are operating within the proper bounds, what people would deem to be acceptable. But you can understand the royal family is a special case, but the point is they don't want to be seen that they are almost living scot-free. So for the Eugenie and Beatrice, I do see it does raise question marks about their living arrangements. Should they be living on royal property when they are now sort of, civilians with their own lives in front of them?
Yes, and those girls are very attached to the royal trappings, aren't they? So if this causes them to be cast aside, that will be personally devastating.
Yeah, I think it will. And it's all part of the sort of fallout from their father and mother's problems linked to Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, Andrew's sort of view of him now, the latest thing is we see every paper splashed with a photograph of him with a great big black eye. How he got it, we don't know. That's subject to medical confidentiality. But again, it's another look of a man who is sort of fallen and fallen from grace. As we saw last, pictures of him being arrested, and now pictures of him driving near Sandringham with a great big black eye. So it's, the whole thing, the pressure on him is always mounting. And this investigation going on into his arrangements, that could take a year before something comes out about that. So for Andrew, this is going to be another very uncomfortable year for him.
And Andrew is just in his mid-60s. So this is a story that could dog the royal family, Rupert, for decades.
This is the problem. You know, every time they seem to be trying to do something good, and we've seen the Princess of Wales going to yesterday in Manchester, meeting people recovering from cancer and promoting charities are linked to cancer and trying to get on the front foot from a PR perspective. And the same applies to William and the King, who will be at the Derby, where I will be tomorrow, which is great for racing to see him out and doing something that his mother was a must-do event. So they're trying to get the right sort of PR. But at all times, the Andrew hangs over the royal family like a big dark cloud. And that's the problem for the royal family. It won't go away. And because of what he did. And obviously there is the Harry factor as well. So these are the two big problems for the royal family from a PR standpoint that just won't go away and cause them problems.
And Rupert, as an elite level journalist, I respect your discretion in regard to this injury to Andrew's face. That won't stop people speculating as to what on earth has happened.
Absolutely, and I do not know what's happened. And it's subject, as you say, to medical confidentiality, but that is one heck of a shiner under any circumstances. So whatever happened, it must have been pretty nasty for him. So we don't know the circumstances, but again, it just further reflects that, you know, his life is not going as he would like it at the moment.
Rupert, and I hear what you're saying. Do you have any sympathy for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, given that he's been found guilty of no crime?
Here, one problem I have is around the Epstein saga, he does appear to be the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And he's the easy person to... whatever he did, it clearly is not good. And I'm not defending him in any way at all. But he does seem to be the poster boy and the one that's easy to have a go at. And as you quite rightly say, he's always protested his innocence. And in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. So this is the problem for him. So that's the only area of sympathy I have, in that I do feel that if we look in America, there does seem to be a lot of it being brushed under the carpet for whatever reason. So this is the problem. And Andrew, I think, is the sort of poster boy of it. And that's why an easy person to sort of say, here we go again, Andrew. And you know, maybe that's the only level of sympathy I have.
Rupert, always a delight to have you on the programme. Good luck with the coverage of the Derby tomorrow, and I'll be looking out for your tips because Mrs. Dolan wants a new frock.
Don't. Mrs. Dolan's not getting a new frock then, if you listen for my tip.
The
anywhere else. The pressure's on. Oh, God, the fragrant Mrs. Dolan depends on Rupert Bell to get a new dress. The world has almost fallen like Andrew.
She hangs on every word, and she's on paddypower.com as we speak. Rupert, we'll catch up soon. Have a great weekend. Rupert Bell is Talk's royal correspondent. This is Talk. Don't go anywhere.
we've seen so many examples of two-tier policing when it comes to dealing with so many different issues. This is just yet another example that the police are being accused of. If you look at the way they've dealt with the pro-Palestinian marches as opposed to the pro-Israeli marches as opposed to everything else. There's examples of
two-tier Kingdom marches.
Yes, exactly. There's two-tier policing across the board, and within policing, it's supposed to be without fear or favour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
An extraordinary intervention by the White House in the wake of the tragic and horrific murder of Henry Novak. The Department of State, the State Department of the United States, effectively the White House, have issued the following statement in the last few hours. Ideological conditioning and two-tiered policing are glaring symptoms of civilizational decline. They must be rejected across the West. The United States sends our condolences to the family of Henry Novak and the people of the United Kingdom at this troubling time. Let's get reaction to this extraordinary intervention on the part of the White House with Harriet Cross, Conservative MP for Gordon and Buchan. Harriet, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. Well, this feels unprecedented, doesn't it? Do you welcome this intervention from the White House?
I think what we've seen in this last week, particularly across the UK and obviously internationally, there's been comments as well, is real concern about how policing in this country has allowed sort of racism to take precedent over other incidences.
Yeah.
So in this case, the poor case of Henry Novak, we saw that despite him saying he'd been stabbed, which he had been, racism and claims of racism took the precedent. And that is something that we cannot allow to continue. It can never be the case that someone's race or someone's comments that they have been racially abused takes precedent over someone who's been physically assaulted, in this case murdered. And so we do need to look at this. There is real concern about things like the anti-racism commitment, which was brought in 2025.
Yeah.
We've called to be reversed. I know the government have said they're going to review it, but we really do need to start looking at people who perpetrate crimes as individuals and not of the group that they belong to.
Well, I completely agree with that wholeheartedly, Harriet, and I agree with your boss, Kemi Badenoch, speaking to Talk's Julia Hartley-Brewer on this very subject yesterday.
If Keir Starmer says something that is bad, I will criticise. If Nigel Farage says something that is bad, I will criticise. But that's my job. I don't want the family being dragged into it, and I don't want the public having to get wider unrest because of it. It's not good for the public. It's not good for the police, who are not instead of solving crimes, they're then having to police, violence, protests, and so on. So that's what I'm saying. But I want people to know that I am determined to fix this. I think there is a responsibility for me also, as a black woman in public life, probably the most senior black person in public life, to say that this is not something the black people want either. We want equal treatment under the law, not special treatment.
Is it disappointing to you, Harriet, that the sort of woke capture of British police forces happened on the watch of the Conservatives?
I think that this is something that we've seen across the world, particularly since the George Floyd murder back in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
And what we've seen now is a loss of common sense from policing, a loss of when a policeman gets to a scene, the lack of them being actually to able to use their intuition, their common sense to assess what's there, because there's been so much in the background of this training against racism, this training against bias. And that should not come into it when you get to a scene, when there is a clear victim at a scene who needs to be believed, who needs to be taken seriously, who needs help and protection. That should be the priority. And there are things more important than racism. Murder is more important than racism. Sexual assault is more important than racism. And this is what the police have to grapple with. And they have to stop being put into a position where they're judged through their ability to cope with sort of the racist element and actually their ability to cope with the position as they find it. Common sense policing, that is what Kemi's calling for. That, of course, after she met Henry's family yesterday, that was also what they said to her. Common sense, and that goes in policing, it goes across actually all our politics. We need to return to that, and that really is lacking at the moment.
I think your comments are courageous, on point, and absolutely right. I'd love it if you can, Harriet Cross, to listen to this voice note from Paul, because I've been asking my audience this morning on Talk Breakfast, is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? Take a listen to this.
The constant badgering of the police force as a whole is out of order. I served 27 years as a police officer. I can't defend the actions of the officers in the Henry Novak case, but this constant criticism now of can we trust the police, etc., is out of order. Most frontline cops would probably echo what has been said on this programme, but to class them all as corrupt and disband the police force is just ludicrous. Things need to change. All this critical race theory stuff is the issue. Left-wing politics is the problem that causes issues in this country and has destroyed this country.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it, Harriet Cross, from Paul there? And he's right to say that our police officers are brave, they're doing the best they can. But he's also right towards the end there to talk about what's happened to the culture of policing and the woke ideas, this ideology of critical race theory, the idea that if you're white, you are racist, even if unconsciously so, that you've got white privilege and other such debunked notions.
Certainly something that we are hearing about, and certainly police men are seeing more and more that they're focusing on. One thing that was said there, and I think it actually comes back to the wider thing, is not all policemen are the same as not all perpetrators of crime are the same. And again, to put all police into one box of all police are X or all police are Y or all police are woke, that's not true either. And we need to stop categorizing people as a whole group. They're not. Every policeman will come to a scene and use their own experience and backgrounds as well. That's fine, as long as we get to the fair result for the victim, and that's what's most important in these cases.
Most definitely. It just seems like the authorities have overcorrected post-Stephen Lawrence, Harriet.
See this in a lot of policy areas, I think. I mean, we're talking about policing at the moment. You can spread that out to other debates as well. I mean, there's always almost seems to be a rush to be slightly more, as far as here to be slightly more equal, slightly less biased, as opposed to actually where you need to be. And as soon as you get that race, it's like that kind of critical arms race. You always have to be further. And that's why we see things diverge. That's why we see politics moving further right, further left, because it's always that race to be slightly more, as opposed to sticking where the common sense, where the pragmatic position is. And it is always a race to the bottom if you're doing that, because you're always trying to out-compete someone else, as opposed to getting to the right result.
Why do you think the Prime Minister has spent so much time attacking Nigel Farage rather than focusing on this issue of two-tier policing?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's quite how I would describe it. I mean, I certainly think the Prime Minister has a lot of work to do. I mean, as we said, this anti-racism commitment came in under this government, and our Shadow Home Office team have been very much calling on them to scrap it for a while now, and it's clear that we were right about that, and that it needs to be done. What I worry about with what Nigel Farage has said this week, and what I find quite disgusting, if I'm honest, is how this has been taken as an opportunity in order to score political points. that is never how this should end up. No one should have looked at the video of what Henry went through in his last few minutes and see that as an opportunity. It's completely reductive.
Is it not, Farage, making people feel heard?
You can make people feel heard. Kemi has also made people feel heard, but she's done it in a lot more measured, a lot more respectful way.
OK. Harriet, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed our conversation. Harriet Cross-Torrie.
You know, you have to remember that Peter Murrell has been the chief executive of the SNP for nigh on a quarter of a century. He's been with Nicola Sturgeon since 2003. She said that she didn't have access to his personal records. They had separate bank accounts. So we can take, well, what you want from all of that. The list that you gave is unbelievable. 124,000 in a camper van, Fortnum and Mason's picnic hampers, a couple of lawnmowers, one for 3,000 quid, 3 dynamic Savile umbrellas, £970. The list goes. A wine coaster. I needed to look up what a wine coaster was. 3,500 quid. So the list goes on.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, serial murder, really depraved crimes, it's quite clear to me that the usual considerations around whether you should be lenient because of this context, whether or not there should be more room for rehabilitation in that context, just don't apply. From the simple commonsensical basis that if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
But this is the thing,
I don't want to take that risk.
If these kids genuinely, you know, and they are kids, everyone involved is a kid. I mean, it's just absolute travesty. If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the street.
Yeah. So there's now a label for children who skip school. You know, parents can't sort it out. In the old days, I used to think that skipping school was against the law. You know, and parents used to be taken to court. Well, no longer anymore. They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home. Again, I keep saying, on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
Universities. Let's get everyone going to university. Well, I think a fundamental job of education is to prepare children for the society they're going to live in a positive way, i.e. prepare them for a job. You've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
Henry Novak's last words were, "I can't breathe," as he was handcuffed, having been stabbed not only in the front but in the back as well, Okay, he stabbed him in the chest twice, stabbed him in the face once, stabbed him in the back of the leg twice. I mean, what an attack. Let's wait and see what sentence this vile piece of garbage gets. Of course, none of it of which will bring back dear Henry. May his soul rest in peace.
It's just so shocking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning to you. 2 minutes past 8. This is Talk Breakfast. And breaking this morning, it is official. Andy Burnham confirms that he wants to be Britain's next Prime Minister, throwing down the gauntlet to Starmer should he win the Makerfield by-election. We will bring reaction from across the political spectrum. Is Andy Burnham the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, the fallout from the Henry Novak murder continues apace, with the war of words between the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage worsening. Plus, shamed Andrew Mountbatten Windsor pocketed extra income by subletting the Royal Lodge. Plus, what is the truth around the large bruise on his face? We've got the inside story. And my question to you this morning is a simple one. Following the horrific murder of Henry Novak and the police treatment of this young lad as he bled out of his own body, is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note and let's talk. You can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online. You can also watch the show. Head to YouTube, search Talk and Up We Pop. Neha is directing our TV output and the brilliant Rory is taking your calls. Now, in an extraordinary intervention, the White House have stepped into the row following the policing scandal of Henry Novak. Here is what the State Department of the United States have said on X in the last few hours. Ideological conditioning and two-tiered policing are glaring symptoms of civilizational decline. They must be rejected across the West. The United States sends our condolences to the family of Henry Novak and the people of the United Kingdom at this troubling time. So there you have it, folks. The United States, the White House, the President are worried about two-tier policing in the UK, linking it to what they call civilizational decline. Let's get reaction from someone with a huge knowledge of criminal justice, former Home Office Minister and broadcaster now, Anne Widdecombe. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to this intervention from the White House?
Well, my first reaction was, for heaven's sake, please do mind your own business. Look at policing in the States. It's not a model that we would want to see here. But my second reaction is that this case has finally, I think, focused minds. Now, I listened to your interview with Harriet Cross, and I listened to what she had to say. But the fact is that Reform has been talking about equal treatment between men and women, black and white, whatever,
yes,
for a very long time. I've done it myself from Reform conference platforms. All the evidence is there. This was not when we proposed an Equal Treatment Act this week. That was not some sudden knee-jerk reaction. That has been the product of a lot of thought. And we've heard nothing from Kemi about what she proposes to do. She's been very dignified about sympathising with the Novak family, as indeed have most politicians. But what she hasn't done is supply a solution. Farage has.
And what do you make of remarks in relation to Nigel Farage from the Prime Minister that the Reform leader is stirring up division?
No, he's not stirring up division. He's proposing solutions to a division that is already there. And he is the only one. He's the only one who has actually come out and said, this is something concrete we can do. We can actually put into law that people are equal. And that is really necessary when we have learned in recent days that police guidance is actually not to treat people equally and not to be colourblind. And that needs to be reversed, and it needs to not just to rely on whatever is going on in Hendon Police College. It actually needs to be given the force of law. And I'm very proud that we've come up with that. But as I say, this wasn't some sudden knee-jerk reaction. The evidence is all there that we have been saying this for the last 2 years.
The message has been consistent. You're absolutely right, Anne. Although the tone has been ratcheted up, is Nigel Farage running scared, raising the temperature of the rhetoric because Makerfield isn't going well?
No, absolutely not. And we shall know exactly how well Makerfield is going or not going on the night itself. He's not doing that. He was genuinely angry, as I think all of us were, about what happened with Henry Novak. And he has, as I say, been sensible enough to propose actual solutions. And when we talk about Makerfield, you know, it's worth pointing out that now that Andy Burnham has confirmed that he's going to stand for the Labour leadership, he's actually confirmed that he's using the people of Makerfield for his own ambitions. He's confirmed that. The instant he said he was going for the Labour leadership, not only has it produced more chaos in government, because there'll be complete uncertainty now. Starmer will have no authority at all if Burnham happens to get in. And even in the short time before we know whether he'll get in or not, you know, there will be more chaos in government because no Prime Minister can function unless he has a solid long-term authority.
And let's take a call if we can, because feelings are running high across the country. Derek is in Manchester. Good morning, Derek. Is British policing... How are you, sir? Is British policing broken?
It's broken. It's broken beyond fixing. The whole system's broken, not just policing. The whole system, politics, local government, the whole system is absolutely broken. And the reason it's broken is because instead of doing the obvious, which was bringing policemen, old-time policemen in and promoting them as per, you know, how good they were.
Yeah, merit.
What we've done, We're brought in educated idiots from university who have just finished their indoctrination, and it's the same as politics. You've got politicians, they've never done anything in their life apart from been to school.
Yeah. Derek, thank you for that. Anne Widdecombe, your reaction to what Derek's had to say there?
Well, I think there is some merit in the argument that we do need coppers who learn on the beat and who learn by functioning in community. Whereas, in fact, in recent years, well, not even recent years, the last couple of decades, the police has moved heavily towards graduate recruitment and career ladders. And I think, so there is some merit in that. But equally, oh, by the way, I did a lot more before entering politics and just go to school, just make that point. But equally, we've got here something much bigger. We think back, for example, to the Brixton race riots. And the reaction the answer to that was that people said, we've got to understand why that community feels so alienated. But when we get, as we should not have got, there's no excuse for it, but when we get riots after this instance, there is no such reaction. Nobody says we've got to really start understanding, and this is what I think Nigel Farage does, we've got to really start understanding why there is a whole community of people who feel they're getting second-class treatment, and just because they're white, you can't dismiss that. We've got to look at it.
Derek in Manchester, thank you for your call. Robert is in Hertfordshire. Robert, you're live on Talk with Anne Widdecombe. What would you like to say?
Well, what I'd like to say is, as far as the Westminster blob and the left-wing backbenchers, everything is going according to plan. They want division. This is what they want. Then it gives them a chance to step up even more iron-fisted. Until we get rid of the Westminster blob and do away with this socialism, which doesn't work because it's corrupt, and it means a change of government, and it means a quick change of government. This is all part of the Marxist plan. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. It's dark days. I feel that the Islam already, interfered with the result of the Manchester airport too, because I know I can't prove it, but bet your life, the defence lawyer, I think I've discussed this before, has insisted that half the jury are Muslim. And what's going to happen is going to get worse when they bring the blasphemy law out. Things need to change, and they're not going to change. They're going to get actually worse, much, much worse.
Robert, stay with us. Anne Widdecombe, Robert's right that this left-wing ideology, so-called woke, has infiltrated all of our public institutions, hasn't it? You've got the NHS talking about chest feeders and birthing humans. You've got a Home Office that has facilitated an open borders policy. The list goes on. You could argue that there's something kind of leftist about net zero. This goes beyond policing, doesn't it?
Oh, of course it goes beyond policing. It's permeated the whole of society, and it's been doing it for years. It's not just the product of this Labour government, past Tory governments, past Labour governments.
Which is why you left, Anne. You called it. You told me 5 years ago on this network that the Tories were institutionally woke.
Well, they are. They are absolutely institutionally woke, because it has been the politically correct thing to be. And nobody, as I say, actually stands back and asks the question, how is this impacting on the different groups within Britain? All we ever ask is, how is this impacting on the ethnic community? Now, we really do have to take a much broader view of the country, and I want to see a country in which everybody is equal. Now, I've been arguing for a long time, and you will have heard me argue, that it's quite wrong to have any positive discrimination at all. And positive discrimination for somebody is negative discrimination for somebody else. And that is the message we've really got to understand. And the positive discrimination in this case that was shown towards the murderer was actually negative discrimination towards the man on the ground.
Anne, wonderful to see you again. It's been far too long. Thank you so much for enhancing the show this morning. Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister. She's been there. She's got the T-shirt. And let me tell you that British policing was like the golden era when she was in the Home Office. How things have declined. And a lot of this is about public confidence, and that's what the calls represent. Just a sense that the cops don't have our back, that they're not equal, that they're not fair, that they're not balanced. And that's not going to be every cop. And we still know it's a dangerous, tough job, which is arguably underpaid. Fine. We love most of the coppers, but let's fix this woke culture because it's killing us. This is Talk Breakfast.
The House of Commons and the House of Lords held a minute's silence for George Floyd. I'm asking all politicians to go to the Speaker because I think we should hold a minute's silence for Henry Novak. Do you agree?
Well, if we believe in equal treatment of people, and if we believe that people who are being held down and cuffed to the police say, I can't breathe as they die, then we absolutely have to.
One final question, Nigel. Would you take the knee for Henry?
No. I don't take the knee for anybody. I'll stand and bow my head.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast 8:17, and a report recommends that NHS staff should be banned from wearing political badges amid concerns about anti-Semitism within the National Health Service. Let's get reaction from Danny Stone, CEO of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. And Danny, isn't it tragic that it's come to this?
It is. You're quite right. Anti-Semitism constitutes what I would call a national crisis at the moment, and it crosses every sector, and the NHS and our health sector is not immune from that. And so we worked very closely with Lord Mann on his report that was published yesterday. And as you've outlined, there are a number of measures in there, including in relation to uniform, that we will now be working with him and with government to see implemented.
Anti-Jewish hatred has not just become acceptable, it's almost a badge of honour, no pun intended, for many groups in our society now. This is really shocking, isn't it, Danny?
It is, yeah. I mean, we've seen people seeking to engage in anti-Semitism or use anti-Semitism to be successful, whether that be in the cultural sector or elsewhere. It's appalling, and the discourse has become enabling. So we see an extreme discourse, and as this report has shown, there are examples of that having an impact on people's health, on their concerns about showing up to, presenting to hospital, about going to the doctors, Jewish women who aren't going to hospital to have their babies before through fear. So the impact is significant and really very upsetting.
Do you see an irrational hatred of Israel as simply a fig leaf for Jew hate?
It can be. So I think seeing Israel as uniquely evil in the world is a form of anti-Semitism. And some of what John has looked at in the report is the way in which that has played out in our health service. I think the point being that no Jewish person should have to express their view. I shouldn't have to, as a Jewish man, say what my views are on Israel in order to be deemed kind of good or bad. And I shouldn't have to face it at all. It should be irrelevant. And in our health service, I expect to be treated like every other Brit on the basis of the condition that I have or the issue that I have, not by someone who is expressing their political views in a place where I'm very vulnerable.
Most definitely. And this is the public sector. It's completely unacceptable that British Jewish people should feel unsafe in a hospital or at a GP surgery.
Absolutely, and that's what John Mann was saying yesterday. He pointed to an example that had been given to him of a Jewish man, I think a staff member, who had bacon smeared on their locker in the workplace, and this was not somewhere where there was a large Jewish community, so this was someone who was suffering in silence, essentially hadn't reported it. And that's just one of numerous examples that were fed into Lord Mann and his review. And it goes to show that this is a systemic problem. So the recommendations that Lord Mann has presented seek to address that by systemically addressing the problem, ensuring managers are well trained, reporting systems work, and that the NHS is capable of addressing this issue in its midst.
And yesterday we saw evidence, Danny, that a quarter of young people, I think it is, consider the actions of Hamas on October the 7th to be justified in some way. Let's remind ourselves that October the 7th was the single worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Quite right. I mean, we generally speaking have a problem in and around young people and their perceptions and understanding of anti-Semitism. There is, whether you look at the academic research, you can look at some of the engagement on social media and some of the research that we've produced about algorithmic prompts and what that's doing to draw children into anti-Semitism. We know that there is a growing acceptability of anti-Semitism for that younger demographic. So it's going to take quite a lot of work. There's a review at present on anti-Semitism in schools that the government will be publishing, or the reviewer will be publishing in due course, and the government will respond to. But it's going to take every sector, whether it be education or health or culture and others, to act and to stamp this anti-Semitism out.
And Danny, can you enlighten us as to why anti-Semitism is in fact a problem for all of us?
Well, anti-Semitism, it's a stress test for democracy. So when politics is unstable, when economies are unstable, people feel uncertain and concerned, and they look to conspiracism for comfort. And anti-Semitism is one of the oldest conspiracy theories. So it's if something's wrong, we need to find someone to blame. And often behind that is the idea that it's Jews that are to blame. So if there is rising anti-Semitism, it's an indicator. It's telling us that there's something wrong in society and we urgently need to get a grip on it.
And these radical groups that we've seen at the so-called peace marches, who have flags and banners that say things like "from the river to the sea," which involves making Israel disappear, which, by the way, sounds like a genocide to me. And when they have globalised the Intifada on a placard, which means bombs in supermarkets and on public transport, these are most certainly not the good people, and yet there are those waving those placards that consider themselves virtuous.
Yeah, I mean, these marches specifically, we have seen anti-Semitism on them repeatedly, and the police gave assurances that they were going to change the approach. And to some degree, they have. And I've been engaged in some of those conversations with the police. So holding a placard saying "globalize the Intifada" is not acceptable, and then people who are standing next to those holding such placards don't get to recuse themselves when the Intifada is globalized. So when Jews are stabbed in the street, that is a globalizing of the Intifada. When people are attacked at Eden Park Synagogue and killed, that is a globalizing of the Intifada. So I would strongly recommend anyone who is on a march and sees anything like that to report it to the police, to distance themselves from it, and perhaps to complain to the organisers, who still have done barely anything to address any of this on the march.
And just briefly, Danny, I could offer you a shorthand, which is that if you hate Jews, then you hate Britain and you hate the West.
I think there's something in that. You know, Jews are an integral part of British society. It's British Jews. That's what we are.
And Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East that has an annual Pride ceremony.
Well, yeah, and to be clear, you know, people can criticise Israel to their heart's content. What I'm looking for is, how would you criticise any other country? Is it the same? Because if you're singling Israel out as uniquely evil in the world, I think that's an anti-Semitic framing. You know, Jews are British. The British Jews are as British as anyone else. And an attack on British Jews, anti-Semitism, is an attack on all of us and our democracy.
Most definitely, and not for the first time in history, Danny, Jewish people are proving to be the canary in the coal mine. More power to you with the important work you do at the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. My thanks to Danny Stone. More to come. Is British policing broken? This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. The time is 8:27. Do you still trust the British police? Is British policing broken? Let me know your thoughts. This from Stella. Good morning, Mark. Policing should go back to the 1960s. A presence in every community. Police stations, that sort of thing. Recruit people who have life experience, so have already worked for several years or been in the armed services. Forget universities and train police colleges, and forget training in police colleges. You need to go back to the real world. Thank you for that. Lee is in Norfolk. Good morning, Lee.
Morning, Mark.
Thank you for your call, Lee. Where are you up to? You sound like you're in a vehicle.
I am, yes. I've just pulled over.
Well, listen, I'm glad you have. I'm sure you're a busy man. What are your thoughts on this? Do you still trust the police in this country?
Not at all. I've got friends who were in the Met and they were diplomatic protection squad, traffic, and they just counted down the days to their retirement after 30 years.
Wow.
And they said it's the bosses, the top coppers are coming in, and it's all political. There's no real policing, and the police they've got now, I don't think would have made the grade 20 years ago.
No, they probably wouldn't have actually literally passed the kind of various tests to become a police officer, right?
No, they're terrible. They're just appalling.
No common sense?
No common sense. The appearance standards have been lowered. They look a mess. You know, it's just approach. I wouldn't trust them. And now I've got the attitude where I see nothing. So I wouldn't help them because I don't trust them.
Lee, can we fix this?
Personally, I think it's beyond. I think we've gone past the point of return, and that's for the country as well. I think we're finished.
Have you got kids, Lee?
Yeah, both my girls. One's a teacher. They're both sort of late 20s, and they're both looking to leave. They don't want to live here. They've both decided there's nothing for them. And on the teaching front, that's another level on the woke and the left. The left have infiltrated the education system on a massive scale.
Lee, we've got children at primary school being asked, are you a boy or a girl today?
It's disgusting. You know, let children be children. You know, they're children at the end of the day. You know, it's the innocence and what they... Just let them be children and grow up and enjoy life.
Lee, you and I are stuck here, aren't we? How does it make you feel that your girls want to go?
Yeah, it's very sad, isn't it, that they see no future in a once great country.
May I ask how old you are, Lee?
I'm 61.
So we're not a million miles apart, just around a decade. Do you remember the United Kingdom in the 80s and early 90s?
Oh, yeah, what a fantastic time. I mean, the 80s the 70s were very grim politically, and the state of the country financially, again, I think it echoes where we are now. But there was spirit and people hadn't given up, which I think people have now.
Lee, you put it so well. In the 80s, people hadn't given up. Lee, I'm honoured that you've called. May God bless you, young man. I want you to stay positive because there has to always be hope, including for your girls. But this conversation has been an important one, and you speak, Lee, for millions. And I'm so honoured that you're such a busy guy. You've pulled over your vehicle to talk to us, and I suspect that will go viral online, and I hope that Elon Musk shares it on X because your words have been very important. Lee, let's speak soon and go and have a good Friday. You take care of yourself, buddy. Festus Akimbuzi is a former police and crime commissioner. Festus, thank you so much for joining us on Talk.
Good morning, Mark. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm very well, and it's lovely to have you with us. Your reaction to what you heard there from Lee, a lot of people do not have confidence in the police anymore.
What I would say to Lee is, I understand where you're coming from, my friend, but you must not give up hope. This country is far, far, far too important for us to give up on it. And it takes people like Lee, like me, like you, Mark, and all those who genuinely care about this country to keep up hope, because things will turn around. I absolutely have every confidence in that.
And Festus, if you were in charge of the police, what policies would you bring in? What would you change?
The first thing that you've got to do is that you've got to have the numbers in.
Great.
It's like in football. If you are playing 11 against 9, you probably don't have a very good chance of winning. If you're playing, if it's an 11v5, you might as well just, cede the game and walk away. At the moment, the crime rate is going up in some areas. The population is growing, but the number of police officers is falling.
Yeah.
Right across the country. And it just means that you've got more of the police officers who are left having to carry much more workload, and they're getting more burnt out. So it just becomes a vicious circle. So that's one thing that has to be changed. So we have to change the retention of those officers as well. But more significantly, it's not just about the numbers. It's how those officers are used and deployed. They have got to be allowed to get on with doing their job and be supported in doing so. And at the moment, that is not happening. And with the right kind of leadership, the right kind of vision, we definitely can do that because the ingredients are there.
Well, Festus, you were a police and crime commissioner and you were there on merit. This is what we want, isn't it? A colourblind society based on merit, and we don't want two-tier policing. If you're a bad person, you get nicked and you go to jail. We don't care what colour you are. We don't care what religion you have. We don't care what country you emanate from.
Yeah. You know, when I was first elected as a police and crime commissioner, I had journalists who wanted to make a big deal out of me being the first black, quote unquote, police and crime commissioner in the country. And actually, I was like, so what?
Yeah.
You know, so what? You know, I'm here on merit. I was selected by the Conservatives to be the candidate for that police and crime commissioner election in a predominantly white county, you know, for the most part. And I was elected with the highest ever number of votes in that area as well, as a police and crime commissioner. And one thing I've come to really believe is that, generally speaking, for the vast majority of people in this country, we really do not care what the color of your skin is. You know, British people just want to live and let live. And I fear that we've had a kind of a capture of our institutions, of some of our political parties even, by this doctrine that has unfortunately meant that the death of a young man like Henry Novak is now creating this outsurge of anger. And that is very unfortunate.
Most definitely. Let's take a call, if we can, Festus, from Phil in London. Phil, your reaction to what Festus has said. Who cares about your skin colour?
Why do you... which party was responsible for gutting the Met in 2010? Which party was in power when the grooming scandal was going on in the 2000s?
Yeah.
Which party did you invite on, more often than not, onto the airwaves to talk about this? I'll give you a clue. They've got a blue rosette.
Now, Phil, I'm so glad you've called. The line is terrible. You're not being censored, I promise you. A lot of wind noise. But let me put that. Phil, thank you for that.
Yes.
Phil feels very strongly that it was the Conservatives that were in power with the woke capture of policing and our public institutions. Phil is very angry about the Tories, and he's not that happy that we welcome so many Tories onto the show, given that they're the ones who created this problem. Your reaction, Festus?
Well, I generally understand the frustration that Phil raised. You know, I have been very public myself about the implications of austerity and how that affected policing. I saw this myself as a special constable on the front line. You know, so I was a volunteer police officer, you know, on response, dealing with the day-to-day policing that many people deal with in this country. So, you know, you're pushing against an open goal. I was not an MP. I did not vote for any of these things. I'm a very clean skin in this regard, but I was one of the guys who was always there, also there, when the Conservative government under Boris started to put the money back into policing. That meant that we saw the highest ever number of police officers on record in 2023, 2024. That is a matter of fact. Go and check the parliamentary records. We got the highest ever number. And now what has happened? The number has fallen to the level that it was in 2010. There are now fewer police officers in this country than we had in 2010, in less than 2 years.
Shocking.
Under a Labour government. So it's not a party political issue, but I get what you're saying. Politicians need to stop meddling, invest in our policing, get them to do their job and leave them alone.
And Festus, we have breaking news, which is 3 more people have been charged with violent disorder after protests in Southampton earlier this week following the murder of Henry Novak. This according to Hampshire Police. Festus, this woke stuff, for example, the idea that you would police different communities in a different way, it's not good, is it, for public confidence in the police? And it doesn't help British people of colour.
The thing is, right, you know, as a black man, I have never, ever asked for anyone to treat me differently to any other human being. Treat me on merit, treat me with respect, dignity, and professionalism. That is it. I do not understand where this intent on calling for treating people differently comes from. Well, I can imagine where it comes from, but the fact that the majority of us do not want it because actually it doesn't help us. Because if you then achieve anything, you're going to get people saying, well, you're only there because of the color of your skin or because of X, Y, Z. We don't want it. We've not asked for it. There's a small number of people who might be clamoring for this, but the vast majority of us do not want it.
Festus, lovely to have you on the show. Really appreciate your wise words. I do hope we speak again in the very near future. Festus Akambiosi is a former police and crime commissioner. What an interesting and important interview that was. Now, let me tell you about Valdo Colcane, who was a schizophrenic man, Callicane, forgive me, who was not accommodated in a secure psychiatric unit. Valdo Callicane not locked up because black people were overrepresented in that sort of setting. Well, he went on to kill 3 people, including Barnaby Webber. Well, Barnaby's mother, Emma, joins us next.
I'm angry, Julia. The family are angry. Everybody who has seen that video or even heard the story understandably will be angry. But the job of politicians is not to tell people, go out and be angry. People have a right to protest. I think that actually people coming out and showing solidarity with the family, showing they're upset about it, sends a signal to political leaders. What it shouldn't be is us whipping up people's rage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let me tell you about two-tier policing, two-tier justice, and a two-tier NHS. Valdo Callicane had serious mental health issues, was a danger to the public, and he was not locked up in a psychiatric institution because of the overrepresentation of black men in such a setting. What was the consequence of this woke box ticking? 3 people murdered, including Grace O'Malley, Kumar, Lee Coates and Barnaby Webber. Well, Barnaby's mother, Emma Webber, joins me now. Good morning, Emma.
Morning, Mark. Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, and I'm very grateful that you've joined us. This is a horrific tragedy, and I can only, on behalf of my viewers and listeners, convey my heartfelt sorrow and prayers for the memory of your amazing son. Before we start, can you, if it's not too painful, can you tell me about Barnaby, the lad that you raised and brought into the world? What kind of boy was he?
Yeah, great kid. He was 19. He didn't even get to 20. And his younger brother, Charlie's going to be 19 this September, and that's so hard. But he was, Barney was, everything we'd want your child to be. But he could be challenging. He could be contradictory, probably like me. But he had this innate kindness, and he was a good person. And if he liked you, he liked you, and he didn't care what your background was, what you looked like, how good or bad you were, or something. And he was just, he was just turning that corner into adulthood, and he was genuinely really good company. And I can't believe it's 3 years ago. Seems a long time to many people, but not to us, sadly.
What did he like doing? What was he into?
Yeah, his passion was cricket, and he absolutely adored it. And he was only in Nottingham that week because he'd gone back, because he had finished his first year at uni. He'd gone back to play cricket for the uni team that he was really proud to be in. And he was grabbing the last couple of games and looking forward to the following Wednesday night, which is their big end of year do. And then he was planning to drive home. He said to me, I'm going to drive home on the Friday, Mum, because I'll still be too hungover on the Thursday.
And Barnaby should still be with us. And he's not, because somebody that was a danger to the public was not dealt with by the authorities.
Yeah, and it isn't just one missed opportunity. It's an absolutely shameful, catastrophic level of failure across every single agency in Nottingham to prevent the monster, Valdo Calicane's actions, because he was left unmanaged, untreated and unchecked out in society, and Barney Grayson Ian paid the ultimate price for him.
And ultimately, Valdo Calicane was not dealt with because of his skin colour, which is why this ideology is so dangerous.
I think it's really important because the inquiry that we're just coming to the end of today, we've had 5 months nearly of evidence, and what has been a repeated theme, and what's clear, and especially with other things like Southport and what happened with Henry Noack, is that the fear and the stigma is preventing professionals to do their jobs, and they're allowing targets and objectives to override doing the right thing. So the very first time that Calicane had interactions with the police was when he was violently attacking and assaulting fellow neighbours in flats he was living in. He was taken into custody, mental health assessment was done, and actually we saw evidence. It's too many black men being detained, so he was released. And then within hours, he went back to the same flats, ended up with a woman, a young student, female student, fleeing for her life. She broke her back so badly. She has life-changing injuries, and that's been a theme throughout. So it isn't just purely because he's black or because of his age or his background, but it's constantly played a theme throughout. And it's that dirty question that no one wants to ask, and I think that's so wrong.
Well, you're right to mention Axel Rudakabana. There are parallels there. This is someone that was flagged by his former head teacher as being a dangerous threat, and she was accused of effectively racially profiling Rudakabana with the implication, well, this is another black boy with a knife. He went on to murder 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift themed dance class. The list goes on, doesn't it? The Manchester Arena bomber Salman Abedi, the security guard doesn't step in. He's curious as to why a man of that appearance with a large backpack is at a girly pop concert. He doesn't. 20 dead. There are too many examples. The grooming gangs, of course, maybe the largest scale example. You gave a great interview to The Telegraph and it's still on their website, actually. And you've asked a question, why was my son's killing in the Nottingham attack not treated as racist? What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I do fear that headline might be a bit misleading, because what I want to make clear is I don't hold any interest in racial colour or background. What I want is to understand if the prevalence of people who are mentally unwell, who are carrying out these kind of heinous crimes, if it is a recognised group, or there's a recognised condition or socioeconomic background, that has to be addressed. And I think the question I've always asked is, and I know it's really unpalatable for politicians to say, but Valdo Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant, but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. I would put the question back of what if it had been another way around? What if it had been a white person in that van? Those questions are really hard and they're very unpalatable, and they have to be asked. And I don't want to politicise. I don't want to see this horrendous far-right extremist hate that's happened this week in Southampton. But if we don't ask these difficult questions, if we don't properly get to the root of what's causing this, it's just going to continue happening.
Well, Emma, I think you're right to call out what could be the double standards of the political establishment. That we had George Floyd. It's tragic, of course, that he died whilst being dealt with by police officers. He had no right to die. And that was a moment. And we were told at that time to be angry and there must be change. Then we have Henry Novak and we're told, don't be angry, nothing to see here, shut up and be quiet. And that's the problem you've got, isn't it? And you mentioned the race card. And there are constituencies politically who would have leveraged what happened to Barnaby if the perpetrator was white and had only targeted black people. Well, it was the opposite of that, and yet no such conversation, and that's the point you're making.
Yeah, my point is that no conversation was had, and I do think that that's because there seems to be this fear to do it, and it really worries me, because what we're seeing is hate against communities that, by the large, are completely peaceably, law-abiding citizens, like the Sikh community, for example. And the day after this happened in Nottingham, we had our family liaison officers, and we had this vigil at the City Hall, of which there were tens of thousands of people. And one of the police officers said to me this morning, Emma, there's been lots of reports of racial attacks, because the news was released that the murderer was a black man, and perhaps he filled me with hate, because what that does, it gives permission for people that want to hate to do the wrong thing, rather than what should be done being done and the questions asked. And so I think I even said on that day, hold no hate for race, sexuality, background, culture. But where there are significant factors at play, then we must address them. And I think what's happening more and more here is we're a passive reactive state in this country. Golders Green is an example where somebody who had a huge history of mental health crimes and violent background wasn't able to be out on the streets. He was extreme in his views. And did he choose the Jewish community, or did he have deep-held anti-Semitic beliefs? I don't know. But what happened on the back of that, Mike, that really concerned me was that the politicians, the loud voices, were standing in solidarity with the Jewish community, which is quite right when they've been attacked. But actually, the question is, why was this man out on the streets anyway? Why is it not being treated? Why was he allowed to be there?
Most definitely. And a governing party that perhaps hasn't done enough to speak out against anti-Semitism, which creates an environment where Golders Green is more likely to happen. Emma, let's take a listen to the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, speaking to Julia Hartley-Brewer on this network yesterday.
If Keir Starmer says something that is bad, I will criticise. If Nigel Farage says something that is bad, I will criticise. But that's my job. I don't want the family being dragged into it, and I don't want the public having to get wider unrest because of it. It's not good for the public. It's not good for the police, who are not instead of solving crimes, they're then having to police, violence, protests, and so on. So that's what I'm saying. But I want people to know that I am determined to fix this. I think my responsibility for me also as a black woman in public life, probably the most senior black person in public life, to say that this is not something the black people want either. We want equal treatment under the law, not special treatment.
Emma, briefly, if you can, you must feel the same way.
She speaks powerfully. I think she probably speaks better than me, but then she's a politician and she's trained. But everything Kemi said there, yes, most definitely. But I do fear the edge of politics coming into all of this, because it has to be, doesn't it, from their perspective?
It's very, very tough. Emma, how are you doing? How is Charlie doing? How are you all doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking about Charlie. He's, like I say, he's 19 in September. He's 2/3 of the way through his A-levels. He's got 2 more next week, and then he is, in his words, free. So he's... So and the terrifying thing is, he's looking at universities now, and he's got his offers, and he's off on that journey that Barney started, and September 2022, ironically the same month that Calla Kane was discharged with no risk assessment, nothing in place whatsoever, was the very month I took my beautiful child to Nottingham, and a city that wasn't safe to have him. And that's a guilt I will carry for the rest of my life. But God, I didn't think I'd have to worry about what the mental health hospitals are like, what was the what was the crime rate, how were the agencies working. You shouldn't have to look at that level. I was just worried he was going to drink too much, not clean his teeth, and not study and get kicked out, and that in that order.
Emma, you're an amazing mum and you're an amazing person, and I want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I think you're honouring Barnaby with this important conversation, and all power to Charlie for a wonderful university experience and a rich life. We all know that's what his brother would want, and I want to thank you so much for joining us. May God bless you, Emma, and the whole family, and I hope we speak again soon. You are listening to Talk Breakfast. We'll have a little bit of a gear change now, and we're going to discuss the sport.
90 minutes in 90 seconds.
And, well, the World Cup is on its way, which we're all looking forward to. So let's go, Sporty, in the company of Josh Hall, who is an Arsenal reporter and a good friend of the show. Josh, have you come down from the high of Arsenal's victory in the winning the championship, becoming the Premier League champions?
Yeah, I think just about. I think losing the Champions League final brought everyone back down to earth pretty quickly, but there's still plenty of celebrations.
Well, no, that's it. And any come down from the Champions League final, or are we just thinking put that down to experience?
I think it's probably a situation where it was maybe slightly too early for Arsenal, especially up against a team like Paris Saint-Germain, who were the holders, who definitely you felt like were going to be favourites in that game. But it really feels to me like this Arsenal team have put themselves in a position to compete for a long time. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were back in that final either next year or the season afterwards.
So, well, there you go. Good luck to them. Josh, what are your thoughts about the big stories of the day? What is burning a hole in your inbox today?
Yeah, obviously, ahead of the World Cup, there's been a talk about Alex Scott, who's out with the England squad, but not actually part of the England squad. And the big news with him is that Andoni Iraola, who's just been hired as the new Liverpool manager, looks like he fancies bringing him to Anfield with him. Obviously, a very, very talented player, and it would be a really big move for him off the back of an impressive year at Bournemouth, obviously.
Well, most definitely. And what is the mood music around England's chances for the World Cup this year, Josh?
It's going to be a really interesting tournament. I think it's one of those where under Thomas Tuchel, people are looking at a completely different outfit to what we've seen under Gareth Southgate in the past. I think it looks like a team that maybe on paper doesn't look as exciting as teams that Gareth Southgate has had, but I would say we've had a lot of hope with those teams in the past and they've just fallen short. So perhaps being a little bit more pessimistic about their chances might be a good thing.
Most definitely. And what about next season's Premier League? I mean, is it possible to say who are going to be the runners and the riders at this early stage?
We're in a really interesting position now, especially with Andoni Iraola coming in at Liverpool. Yeah. All of the big six teams, bar Arsenal, are starting the season with a different manager than they started last season. So it's going to be a completely different prospect in terms of those teams that are competing for the title. I personally would have Arsenal as favourites in this early stage, just given that they've got Mikel Arteta in pace, they've got that monkey off their back, but it's going to be a really interesting campaign as always.
Of course, the great hope is that my team, Tottenham, can stay up again, because that looks to be our trophy these days. Josh, lovely to see you. We'll catch up soon. This is Talk Breakfast.
The video footage was so deeply shocking, the behaviour of the police disgraceful and stupid, and it shows something deeply rotten in our society.
Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives.
Nigel Farage said today it should be white lives matter. Are you making the same point?
It should be everyone matters.
And when you hear Henry's faltering voice, losing its tone, losing its volume as his life ebbs away, you're not going to say, I don't think so, mate. And when somebody tells you they've been stabbed, your first job as a police officer is the preservation of life.
Henry was pulled across the gravel, his hands forced behind his back, and he was placed in handcuffs. Instead of being treated as a dying victim, police formally arrested Henry for assault and read him his rights. That was the last thing he heard.
I do want to address the Henry Novak case and what has happened since I was on air yesterday. Because after his son's murderer was sentenced on Monday, Mark Novak said of his son, "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone." Since then, Nigel Farage, the Tories and pretty much everyone else, people like me, we're all being accused of stoking that very division, hatred and tension that Mark Novak talked about.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. It is 3 minutes past 9. This is Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. Of course, I'm back tomorrow and Sunday as well. Breaking this morning, Andy Burnham confirms he wants to be Britain's next Prime Minister, throwing down the gauntlet to Starmer should he win the Makerfield by-election. We will bring reaction from across the political spectrum, including in just a moment from one of the most respected journalists in the country. Is Burnham the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, the fallout from the Henry Novak murder continues apace, with the war of words between the Prime Minister and Nigel Farage worsening. Plus, a shamed Andrew Mountbatten Windsor pocketed extra income by subletting the Royal Lodge. And what is the truth around the large bruise on his face? We've got the inside story. And my question to you this morning is a simple one. Is British policing broken? Do you still trust the cops? Do you have confidence in our police officers? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. You can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online. You can also watch the show. Head to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Lots to get through, folks. It's all about your opinions. Do you still trust your police officers? Do you still have faith in British policing? Is British policing broken? All of that to come. First, Dolan's dispatch. Now, in many ways, the solution for this country is to simply go back to where we were 3 or 4 decades ago. A well-integrated, economically productive, multi-ethnic society wrapped around British values, British traditions, the rule of law and the flag. It isn't complicated. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Donald Trump wanted to make America great again. We just need to make Britain again. But all of our public institutions have been infected by the radical leftist ideology of woke. It has seen our once great and now severely diminished National Health Service refer to women as birthing humans and chest feeders, with leaflets printed out about the menopause with no reference to females, and women nurses having to go to court to keep men out of their changing facilities at the hospitals in which they work. We've had a Home Office that has presided over an effective open borders policy, both illegal and legal. Institutions like English Heritage and the Church of England have campaigned for slavery reparations, an insane, wrong-headed idea that you can only support if you have zero understanding of history and if you hate this country. And we now have a police force and a judiciary that have abandoned the very British idea of a colourblind society. And they've signed up to something called anti-racism, which sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Who isn't against racism? But of course, this is another example of left-wing Orwellian doublespeak, because what it actually means is unequal treatment under the law based upon your skin colour. It's why guidance to judges, mercifully since scrapped, suggested that black and brown British people should receive shorter sentences for crimes committed. Anti-racism believes in white privilege. Well, try explaining that one to a homeless veteran sleeping in a doorway in one of our city centres. Try explaining that to a generation of young white working class boys who have the lowest academic attainment in the country, far below any other ethnic group. So much for white privilege. This wokery, so-called anti-racism, which of course is deeply racist, contains the idea of unconscious bias, which basically means that you're prejudiced if you're white. The British ideology of the anti-British ideology of anti-racism or critical race theory actually believes in segregation. You heard me right. If you're an anti-racist, you believe in segregation, which you and I thought was bad. But this involves ideas like safe spaces at university for people of colour and black-only audiences at theatre shows to escape, and I quote, the white gaze. The list goes on of this madness. So everything that we're dealing with here is a radical leftist ideology, and it's a nightmare. Anti-racism is deeply racist, with policies like diversity, equity and inclusion, which saw the RAF refuse to hire white applicants and saw a large bank adopt a policy that you needed permission from senior management if you're going to hire someone that was not from an ethnic minority background. It's an ideology that has now taken hold of British policing. The cops who handcuffed a dying boy, Henry Novak, didn't make a mistake. It wasn't a misjudgment or incompetence. It was their training. It was policy. They were doing what they were trained to do, what they were taught to do, which is to treat one group of people differently from another, which is why we should be angry, which is why this is a George Floyd moment for the country. So Keir Starmer, of course, wants to brush this under the carpet. He wants to tell you that when it comes to Henry Novak or Axel Rudick-Cabana or the Manchester Arena bomber or the grooming gangs or the Nottingham triple murderer who wasn't locked up because black men are overrepresented in such a setting, Starmer doesn't want us to discuss any of this, and he wants to pretend it isn't happening. He doesn't want you to believe the evidence of your own eyes and your own ears, except in growing numbers, you do. 0344 499 1000, your reaction. With me is the Deputy Content Editor at The Telegraph, Annabelle Denham. Hello, Annabelle.
Good morning.
It's lovely to have you on the show. This woke ideology has infiltrated every public institution in the country. It is dangerous and wrong.
Absolutely. And it's been going on for such a long time. And, you know, when I first watched that disgusting, sickening footage of Henry Novak, I thought to myself, this is exactly what people like you and I and many others warned about, Mark, years and years ago as the logical endpoint of this country's fixation with anti-racism and woke and diversity and equity and inclusion. This was where the country was going to end up. And when we tried to issue these warnings, we were told that we were being hysterical. We were told that we were, by the Be Kind Brigade, that we were being unreasonable, unfair, even bigoted in certain circumstances. And look at the situation the country now finds itself in. Obviously, the DEI dogma is most prevalent in the public sector. It's not altogether surprising if you think about it. People who are interested in free markets and free enterprise tend to find themselves in the private sector, trying to set up businesses, work for private companies, focus on the bottom line. And then you have those who are more left-wing going into public sector roles, not exclusively, of course. You have institutions which decades ago weren't left-wing, which hadn't been taken over by this left-wing ideology, which over time, as per Sullivan's law, have just drifted to the left. And this is the situation that we now find ourselves in. It's absolutely appalling. I hope, like you do, that we are going to have some sort of correction as a consequence of the appalling murder and treatment of Henry Novak. But there doesn't seem to be much political will for it at the moment, that I'm seeing at least.
Annabelle, it feels like, or it seems like, we've been subjected to a cultural revolution that no one voted for.
Well, I mean, some people vote for it, don't they, Mark, unfortunately. And if you look at polling of particularly younger generations at the moment, they are quite left-wing. In fact, the think tank that I worked at before joining The Telegraph in about 2021 did some polling of young people and found that 67% of them would rather live in a socialist society, a socialist economy, than a capitalist one. So my fear is that there are a lot of people in this country who quite understandably feel as though the system isn't working for them, and the Tories have a lot to answer for in that regard, who are increasingly attracted to some of these very dangerous ideas, socialist ideas, who are fixated on such issues as inequality, as the left has long been. So, you know, we are becoming perhaps increasingly a left-wing country, though I am to suggest such a thing. But nevertheless, you are right that nobody voted for a lot of this nonsense. And, you know, you talked about anti-racism earlier and how it's often just used as a cover for racism against white people. I actually think it's racist against ethnic minorities as well, because it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's this idea that if the private sector institutions didn't have DEI policies, then there would be no way that ethnic minorities could rise through the ranks, for instance. Can't we revert to a situation where we live in a meritocracy where the best candidate is selected for a particular role?
Rishi Sunak didn't need a helping hand or a shortlist to become Prime Minister.
No, of course he didn't. We've had many ethnic minorities who've become senior figures in politics, as indeed they have across all industries, all sectors of our economy, and they have done so on merit. They don't need a hand up. 20 years ago, we lived in a society where we were colourblind, and somehow over the last few years, we morphed into a society where we place everybody in these boxes. We place them all on this pyramid of sort of intersectional victimhood, and we're obsessed with the colour of people's skin. We're obsessed with their sexual orientation. We're obsessed with their gender. These things shouldn't matter. We're all individuals. We all ought to be treated equally, and we all ought to have equal opportunity to succeed based on our own merits.
This new modern incarnation of leftism, Annabelle, strikes me as a pathology. And tell me if I'm getting carried away, but I think it simply suffuses the whole country. So I would argue that net zero is suffused in woke ideology, this pathological idea that if we make ourselves poorer and destroy our industries, we're somehow going to save the planet. Slavery reparations, another insane anti-historic pathology. Open borders, the same thing. Suicidal empathy for 3 billion poor people around the world. The list goes on, doesn't it? The criminal justice system, shorter sentences for people of colour who have stabbed you. I mean, it just feels like a collective sickness.
It does. I think that a lot of this can be traced back to this concept that we commit an original sin by industrialising. We were one of the first countries to do so, and we have benefited enormously from that. Around the time that we were rapidly expanding economically and developing, there was the slave trade, and there is this idea, very, very prevalent, that the UK benefited and grew and prospered by trampling on the backs of slaves. It was through the slave trade that we saw such enormous economic expansion. But actually, recently, economists and academics have debunked some of those claims. But this is the ultimate idea. It's that we committed this original sin and that we ought to atone for it now. And therefore, we must cripple ourselves economically as a society in order to, as some sort of form of penance. And as you say, it's suicidal empathy. It'll be extremely destructive to this country. It'll immiserate millions of people, including those who are the poorest in this country. And,
of course.
I think that there are many Labour politicians really who believe that to lose is to win. So when you look at something like net zero, it doesn't matter if we've got the highest energy costs in the world, provided we're able to show global leadership on net zero, as though anybody is going to try and follow our lead when we're seeing soaring costs whilst others are finding other ways of adapting, not least with the Iran conflict. It's all very bad news for our economy. It's bad news for our society. And unfortunately, best case scenario, we've got 3 more years of a Labour government. Worst case scenario, we've got 3 more years of a Labour government followed by some sort of rainbow coalition on the left of Greens and SNP and Labour and the Liberal Democrats.
And added to my list, we've got open borders, we've got net zero, we've got 2-tier policing and 2-tier justice. We also have the cult of welfareism. Well, it's a pathology for a country to drive itself into the red and live not within its means. Depleting the military is another self-destructive act which feels irredeemably woke. I could even throw in the COVID overreaction and lockdowns. It seems that the destination is the same across the board in terms of policy, and that destination, Annabelle, without being too melodramatic, is destruction. None of this enhances us.
Well, it's the degrowth philosophy, which I think is grabbing hold, that many in the Greens are supportive of, and this idea that if we don't continue to expand economically, that could potentially be a good thing. Well, I personally think that that's an appalling and immoral outlook, the idea that you're going to sort of deliberately make the lives, particularly of the poorest in your country, even worse, deliberately, is to me just simply beyond the pale. So, you mentioned welfare. That's deeply troubling. And I think it is an issue that is starting to really kind of puncture into the public consciousness now, and not least with that startling figure earlier this year that the government is spending more on welfare than it's raising in income tax. The math simply does not add up. It is simply unsustainable. The fact that we're spending £100 billion a year servicing the national debt, the fact that we're seeing pretty major sort of fluctuations when it comes to gilt yields in this country, because lenders are increasingly concerned about our financial position, and they will continue to be if we end up with a more left-wing administration at some point over the next few months. Of course, what we need is a government to come in that is going to properly address some of the tough issues that we need to resolve in this country, cutting welfare, abandoning net zero. Of course, decarbonisation is important, but what we don't need is some arbitrary target set by a government 8 years ago, with no clue of actually how we were ever going to meet it. We need to stop the boats. We need to massively reduce legal migration and ensure that we really are only allowing the best and brightest into this country. All these sorts of things that need to be done. But I'm just not sure that there are many politicians in this country who are willing to confront those challenges.
Yes, I mean, just briefly, Annabelle, I just honestly feel this to my core, in my bones, that there is an ideological sickness now in the country. Yes, we've got practical problems of the economy and the border and energy supply. That's nuts and bolts, isn't it? But I've always said we need an economic and political revolution in the country. But perhaps most importantly, Annabelle, I feel we need a cultural shift. That, to me, is at the heart of it.
Well, I think a big I mentioned earlier the Be Kind Brigade, and I think
and they've won.
Well, they have, but I think the argument for them to make it so straightforward. It is treat everybody kindly, and ignore the fact
that's a lie.
Well, ignore the fact that you're inevitably going to end up with the interests of different groups colliding. Perhaps the most obvious example being that between trans women and biological women.
It's what they want.
Ignore it, but they're just ignoring the idea that at some point somebody has to lose. It's sort of living in a fantasy land, and to me, that's almost sort of the really damaging part of it is the idea that you don't have to make decisions, that politicians don't have genuinely tough choices, and that you can just sort of bob along trying to pretend that you're going to be kind to each and every group. And that, to me, has been so pernicious. I think that there has been a big cultural shift. We've had this realignment, political realignment that's been underway since 2016, since the Brexit referendum.
Yeah.
That was a real moment in British politics and British history where people said they were not happy with the direction of travel, where it became apparent that the most salient issues were cultural rather than economic. People did not want very high levels of immigration. They were extremely concerned that the government was ignoring the failures of integration, that it was pursuing the multiculturalism dogma. And so in some ways, I think that there has been a sort of cultural shift underway, that the political establishment is so detached from it. That's why Reform have been able to be so successful. It's why they've been polling in the high 20s, dominating polls for the last couple of years. It's because people finally, the silent majority, finally feel as though there are politicians out there who represent their views and are unafraid to voice them. For a long time, I think people have felt these things, but they've been silenced by, the narrowing of the field of acceptable speech.
Annabelle, a couple of seconds as a closing thought. Can I offer you a quote? The facts of life are conservative, Margaret Hilda Thatcher.
Well, of course she's
does that nudge us in the right direction? The facts of life are conservative. You have to live within your means. You have to have law and order. You have to have border control. You need a military. The facts of life are conservative.
she's right. And every time that we have strayed too far from that, it has been calamitous for this country, as we saw in the 1970s, and we will see, I expect it, or are seeing in the 2020s. And, you know, my hope is that we can, in 2029, have a government which is on the right of British politics, which can restore some of those principles.
Annabelle, deeply grateful for your time. One of the finest journalists in the country, the deputy content editor and fantastic columnist at The Telegraph, Annabelle Denham. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast, 9:23.
Nigel Farage, do all diversity training schemes need to be scrapped?
The whole lot. The whole lot. This is where the poison starts. I had a lot of emails from serving and ex-police officers. One guy said, look, there's only one thing I fear as a police officer in terms of losing my job, and that is a member of the public making a complaint that I've acted in a racist way or not acted to intervene in a racist incident. If I miss a murder, if I miss a stabbing, well, that's too bad. But if I miss an accusation of racism, I will be suspended immediately.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
How do we fix our broken policing? This is Talk Breakfast. It's 9:26. With me now is another outstanding world-class journalist. I'm spoiled today. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Really well. Lovely to see you again. These are dark times, aren't they? And there's a real issue coming through in the text messages, the calls to the show, the voice notes, a lack of confidence now in our cops.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not remotely surprising, isn't it, given what we saw in relation to Henry Novak? You know, we've all seen that body cam footage. I've seen it a few times now because I've had to write about it quite a few times. And it's just horrendous, the utter failure of those police forces on the ground who ignored this boy, wouldn't listen to he was basically begging for his life, saying, I can't breathe, I've been stabbed. But they seem to put more emphasis on the accusation of racism. And I think what's come to light over the past few days, and this is something that some of us have known for quite some time, which is that so-called anti-racism training, which is rife in the police and across the state in modern Britain, that has really warped people's minds. It's really twisted their judgment. It's really made them so fearful of ever being accused of racism or Islamophobia or anything else that they can't even act on their basic human instincts. So it's time to rid the police of all these influences now.
Most definitely. And the progressive left are very clever, aren't they, Brendan, with their Orwellian doublespeak, because anti-racism sounds lovely. Who disagrees with that?
Well, exactly. You know, we all, most people are anti-racist. Certainly everyone I know is anti-racist in the sense that we don't think you should judge an individual by his race. That's the basis of anti-racism. But what the left has done under the title of anti-racism, they've done the complete opposite of that. They have reintroduced racial thinking. They have rehabilitated the racial consciousness. They do now say that we should judge people by the color of their skin. We should see white men in particular as potentially problematic and privileged and people who need to check their privilege. We should see black and brown people as victims who always need a certain approach. They have divided us into different racial categories and they kind of accord you moral worth or deny you moral worth depending on what race you are. That is racism. And we now know that the police were acting on that neo-racism because we've seen all the policy documents in the police which say you shouldn't treat people equally, you shouldn't treat them as the same, you should approach non-white people in a more sympathetic way. So racism has been rehabilitated in the name of anti-racism. It is, as you say, absolutely Orwellian and really needs to be challenged.
In the aftermath of this tragedy and the scandal of the police's actions that fateful night, Brendan, why has the Prime Minister spent so much time attacking Nigel Farage?
It's actually really starting to make me sick. The way they have all turned on Farage because he called for pure cold rage. By the way, that's what millions of people felt when they watched that body cam footage. My WhatsApp groups on Monday night when that footage was released, my WhatsApps were buzzing with people who don't work in politics, don't work in the media, ordinary people, friends of mine, who said they felt physically ill. They were fuming. They used words I would never dare to use on your show, Mark.
Yeah.
They were very, very angry. And so the way in which Starmer has turned on Farage, I'll tell you why. It's because he's back in his comfort zone. He can't handle the questions that this awful case raises about two-tier policing, identity politics, state failure. He can't handle those. So he's scurried back into his comfort zone, which is bashing Farage, bashing populists, saying that we're all a menace to the nation. You know, this is the truth of it. It's not Farage that is exploiting this tragedy. It's Starmer. He is exploiting the grief of this family to hide away from perfectly legitimate questions about two-tier policing and identity politics. And I think it's really shameful behaviour.
Most definitely. And there are parallels with 2020, aren't there, Brendan? We were told in 2020, following the very tragic and awful murder of George Floyd, that we should be angry and there must be change. Now, after Henry Novak, we're being told, shut up, racist.
It's so, I mean, the hypocrisy is so brazen, it's almost admirable at this point. You know, it's such a high level of shamelessness that we're seeing from the media elites, the political elites. These are all people who openly called for rage and fury after the death of George Floyd. Sadiq Khan said, I understand the fury that has greeted this killing. People in The Guardian, people in The Independent, journalists across those newspapers said, we need rage. And they celebrated the exportation of fury from America across the world. They openly celebrated anger. But as soon as Farage, and let's be honest, as soon as ordinary working class Brits got angry about this case, suddenly they were reaching for the smelling salts. Suddenly they were dashing for the fainting couch. You know, they are allowed to get angry because they're well educated and they have all the right opinions. But we, ordinary people, are not allowed to get angry because apparently that's scary. So there's such an extraordinary double standard in who is allowed to feel rage and who is not.
Most definitely. And listen, I've just been joined in the last hour by Emma Webber, who, as you'll be aware, Brendan, her son Barnaby was murdered by Valdo Colkane, who should have been locked up but wasn't because of a very, very politically correct decision that black men are overrepresented in such a setting. As a result, 3 tragically murdered people. She raised a good point, because this is the guy, Valdo Colkane, who murdered 3 white people and targeted multiple other white people and no people of colour. And yet she said there's been no conversation around that person's racial motivations. So this is the selective moral blindness of the progressive left, that they see racism everywhere except where they don't see it.
Exactly right. And they would never see a case like the horrific murders in Nottingham. They would never see that as racist because it would flip their narrative too much. It would interfere too much with their comforting ideology, which is that white people are a problem and black people are victims. So they just block out anything that interferes with their infantile moral script. And just think if the situation in Southampton had been reversed. Just imagine if it had been a white family or a mob of whites who had attacked and taunted and virtually lynched an Asian heritage kid, because that's what happened to Henry Novak. He was chased, he was stabbed, he was taunted, he was filmed, he was made fun of, he was disbelieved by the police, he was dragged by the police. Just tell me, what do you think would happen, Mark, if a gang of whites had done that to a non-white kid, and if the police had behaved like that in response to a non-white kid? I'll tell you what would happen. There'd be riots. It would be on the front pages of the liberal press every single day. The left would not stop talking about it for years and years. But because it's the other way around, they don't give a damn. That is the honest truth about their cruel, racist politics.
Oh, it would have been Britain's George Floyd moment. There would have been murals. There would have been Twitter bios. You'd have the Prime Minister speaking instantly about this, and there would be some performative gesture equivalent to taking the knee. What did Henry Novak get from the Prime Minister for days and days and days? Silence.
Nothing. I mean, it's unforgivable. And I think the way Starmer has behaved is really outrageous. And he's at the end of his time in office.
Fag end of his premiership.
Fag end, exactly right. And when I saw Farage stand up in the Commons the other day and ask questions about two-tier policing, and the jeering that he was greeted with by virtually everyone apart from his own Reform colleagues, the other MPs were booing him, they were laughing, they were pointing at him. I just felt this is the end of an era. This is a parliament that doesn't even deserve to be there because it is so fantastically out of touch with the sentiment of ordinary voters. And I just can't wait till they get their comeuppance. I hope they get their comeuppance in Makerfield. That's a bit touch and go, but I really hope they get it at the next general election. We need to clear these people out and get a new group of people in.
I could listen to Brendan O'Neill all day, and luckily I can, because he is the star of the Brendan O'Neill Show, which is just a fantastic interview show, which you can listen to as a podcast. You can watch it on YouTube. He's also the chief political writer at Spiked, which is an absolutely brilliant online newspaper, and it is mercifully free. Just head to spiked-online.com. Brendan, lovely to see you. We'll catch up soon. Let's hit the candidate list for Makerfield in, of course, the northwest, where there is the small matter of a by-election happening very, very shortly. We have the list here. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats, Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham, Labour, Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate, Paul Gould, Independent, Alan Howling, Loud Hope, Official, Monster Raving Loony Party, Robert Kenyon, Reform UK, Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. I might get that turned into a song. What do you think? Little music bed under there? Shall we do a little competition? Let's have some fun this morning. Now, folks, good news. The FIFA World Cup kicks off next Thursday, and our friends at talkSPORT are sending you and a mate straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money all taken care of. Plus, Adidas are throwing in the official Tri-Onda match ball and a fresh pair of boots. So don't miss out. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:39 Talk Breakfast. How do we solve our broken policing? Colin Sutton is a police and crime advisor to Reform UK. Good morning, Colin.
Morning, Mark.
Congratulations on the success of your brilliant Prime documentary show about Levi Belfield. I'd recommend that to everyone. What do you make in the aftermath of the anger around Henry Novak? What are your thoughts, you know, as we look back at what's happened, Colin?
I'm staggered. I'm staggered that what we see from this government is a cycle of something that is politically toxic to them comes out, and they just lie, they just obstruct, they just deflect and pretend that things are fine and not happening and don't exist, and then wait for the next one. You know, and it's not going to get any better. This is a good one, Mark. I had pointed out to me this morning. It's been reported by The Guardian. There's a post called His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary. It's a very archaic title, but essentially it is the government's prime advisor, top advisor on policing. And they're choosing a new one. They did the final interviews in the middle of May. They haven't announced who got it yet, but here are the two candidates. The two candidates were Andrew Marsh. Now, he is the head of the College of Policing, which is the organisation responsible for these police race action plans and all the other wokery that's been going on. And he was formerly between 2016 and 2013 to 16. He was the Chief Constable of Hampshire, of course, that was involved. Gracious. And the other candidate was Olivia Pinckney, and she took over from him as Chief Constable of Hampshire. When she retired in 2023, she became an advisor to the Labour Party, and she's been labelled the Queen of Woke. So those are the two candidates for that vital role in policing, and nothing's going to change, is it? Because they're fully signed up to how it is and how clearly, from what's been said, the current government wants it to be.
Well, that is deeply concerning, Colin, and it doesn't bode well. Colin, let's take a couple of calls if we can, because I'd love your thoughts on what my viewers and listeners have to say on this. Anne is in Nottinghamshire. Good morning, Anne. Welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm really well. Lovely to have you on the show. It's my understanding that you don't call radio stations very often.
Absolutely not. It's not a thing I do.
Well, listen, what's provoked you to do that today, Anne?
Well, basically, he talked about the police and how much faith he's got in them. My husband had a RTC on his bicycle and they just wasn't bothered.
No, they don't care, do they?
They just don't care. And you can go into any supermarket now and nick 200 quid's worth of goods, and the taxpayers, like myself and many others, who pay the way, are getting charged even more by them not being able to do the job properly through bureaucracy and paperwork, irrelevant to whether you're black, white or pink.
And the people around you, your friends and family, feel the same lack of confidence in the police?
Yeah, because my mum's had instances of knock a door run and stuff like that, and they're just not interested.
Why do you think it's happened? Why do you think that there is so much crime now? Why do you think this has happened to the police, Anne?
Right, I should tell you where it all starts from, Mark, but a lot of people aren't going to agree with me. It all starts at home. So when they took the parental rights off us parents, and then the parents send the kids to school, and the schools can't. I mean, we used to get clobbered by teachers at school. We were scared at police as growing up.
Yeah.
I said it all comes back from being at home. And the police are not funded, like the armed forces are not funded. We are just a sitting duck. That's another story.
Anne, I think you've made some brilliant points. You have to promise me that you'll call me again, because what you've said there is very interesting, very fresh in this debate and very important. And thank you for that. And they're mentioning families and the fact that we used to have some respect for the institutions. You feared the police, and actually you feared your headmaster or headmistress as well. Before we come back to Colin, Dave is in Chorley. Dave, what would you like to say to Colin, who is the police and crime advisor to Reform UK?
Morning.
Morning.
I'm kind of disgusted with my country at the moment. I don't know where we're going. It's just a shambles of a mockery of a shambles.
Yeah.
That's the problem. These people snarling at Nigel Farage. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not a Reform voter by a long way. Not a chance at this present moment in time. I'd like to ask him where that 380 million pound a day went during Brexit, but that's another story.
Fair enough.
They're snarling at him like we're back in the prehistoric times. They're pointing, fingering. There's one guy in that picture. I don't know who he is. He's the most angriest person I've ever seen. I've seen some people in my 60 years in my life. And what I said to the lady when I phoned up, I said to her, "You've got 7 weeks off coming up for the holidays. Why does every MP, the 599 MPs, with the exception of Mr Farage, go back to the constituencies and say to his constituencies, do you think we have a two-tier policing in our system? Get the reaction from their constituency, knock on the door, do old-fashioned MPing, knock on the door and ask them, come back after swear on the Bible and give the House the findings." But I bet they won't. I bet they won't do that because they'll be shocked.
So, Dave, what you're saying to myself and Colin is that the political establishment are not listening to the public, which is why you would love the MPs to go door to door.
110%. Sorry, there's no such thing as 110%. 100%. You know, 100%, yes. It's the British public. It's us. I've been on the road now. I deliver bread for a job. I've been on the road now since 2 a.m. every single day.
Wow.
Okay, I'm still out now. I'm just heading back. I've had to pull over, obviously, to take this phone call. I'm not the only person that's doing this to keep food on the table. If we don't deliver bread, you don't get your toast in the morning. It's as simple as that. Just like the milkman doesn't, and it's us that's putting these people in charge of our country, and they're just spending money they don't give a monkeys. They do not give a monkeys what they spend money on.
Because it's not their money.
Nobody pays for other people's holiday homes. Like if you've got, for instance, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a name out. Tom Cruise, and he's got 2 houses. He's got a holiday home in Spain and one in America. He doesn't turn around and say, "Can somebody pay for my holiday home in Spain? I'm going to redecorate it. I'll just get somebody to pay for bill for it." So why does an MP? Why does an MP have to pay? Why do they get expenses for travelling? I don't get expenses for travelling for work.
Dave, you are living in the real world and you are feeling the consequences of the failure of the political establishment, who you rightly point out are not just failing, they're also not listening. David, please call me again soon, and maximum respect to you. Go on.
Just 2 final things.
Go for it.
My total condolences to the family. It's absolutely disgusting. And just for one final point, I listened to you over the past few months, this channel. I've gone off music completely.
Okay.
You and Jeremy. Not once have I heard anybody come on and speak to Jeremy or yourself who actually voted Labour in 2 years ago. Not once. Not once has somebody put all their hands up and said, "Look, I do apologise. I'm one of them people."
Dave.
So where are they now and what are their thoughts?
I live in hope that they will call one day because I want them to. I'd quite like Carol Vorderman, who said we should vote Labour. Dave, you are a legend. I'm so grateful for your call and your passion, your articulacy, everything you've had to say. I don't know how you follow that, Colin Sutton.
Well, what I'll say to Dave is that we, Reform, are the party for people like him who get up in the morning and work. I call them PWECs, people with alarm clocks. It's not right that people like Dave get up at 2 in the morning and go working hard, and most of their taxes get given to people who can't be bothered to do the same thing. And that's very much where we're from. Nigel Farage, in what he said about the two-tier policing, is actually trying to articulate what the feeling of the majority of the people in this country is. It's absolutely fatuous that it's been turned around and say he's causing division, because trying to say that things are done absolutely equitably and with equality to everybody is the polar opposite of causing division. But the establishment, the government, the Tories, they've got no other thing they can do but to try and deflect and say, no, it's not so. That isn't how it is, because they have no answers and because they want the status quo to continue, as we've seen from what I said about this next appointment that the government are going to make. So I would say to Dave, he said he's a long way from voting for Reform. I would say, well, who is going to really look after your interests? You ought to take a look and think, how are things going to change? And things are only actually going to change if you don't get people who are dyed-in-the-wool politicians and political professionals, people who have been in your world, the real world, and you put them in charge.
Check out Colin's fantastic new series on Amazon Prime about the serial killer Levi Belfield. Colin will speak soon. Looking forward to it already. Police and crime advisor to Reform UK. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
Now, Javraj, do all diversity training schemes need to be scrapped?
The whole lot. The whole lot. This is where the poison starts. I had a lot of emails from serving and ex-police officers. One guy said, look, there's only one thing I fear as a police officer in terms of losing my job, and that is a member of the public making a complaint that I've acted in a racist way or not acted to intervene in a racist incident. If I miss a murder, if I miss a stabbing, well, that's too bad. But if I miss an accusation of racism, I will be suspended immediately.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast, an extraordinary headline in the Daily Telegraph. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor cashed in with secret rent deals, profiting potentially to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds via income from the Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate. Meanwhile, an inexplicable bruise on his face. What is going on with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Let's get the views of the globally renowned royal biographer and journalist Angela Levin. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning.
The plot thickens. First of all, what is going on with that bruise?
Well, I've tried to find out, and all they say is that it's not serious. So I tried about 10 people. They all say not serious. I don't know.
But as a great journalist, that's probably a red flag to you. If they say nothing to see here, Angela, you become more interested.
Yeah, I can't find out, I'm afraid. We either got a punch or he's got some medical thing. But that's all I can tell you.
You don't think Sarah Ferguson has given him a right hook, do you?
Well, anybody could give him a right hook, couldn't they, at the moment?
There's a long list. It would be a queue, wouldn't it?
It would be a queue.
Either way, it's another very awkward photograph that will bring shame and embarrassment on the royal family following that now iconic image of him reclined in the back of his limousine after his arrest.
Yes. But we don't know that anybody has, or it might be from some illness that's, insect that's had a good bite. So I can't say more than that.
No, of course. And we don't know, and you're absolutely right, Angela. You're a proper journalist that it isn't going to guess. It won't stop people speculating, though, will it?
I think some will and some won't be that interested. I think at the moment they're all very interested about him taking money from the little houses around the Royal Lodge.
Well, let's talk about that. So he was accommodated at the Royal Lodge on a peppercorn rent, which is a minimal below market rate. And it took a long time to evict him. It only happened after his arrest. What's the story here? It seems that he's been charging rent to possibly palace staff and profiting personally.
Yes, and then he keeps the money, you see. I mean, he's
nice.
It's just terrible, isn't it? And the people who are there, have to pay, are his chef, his aides, and you'd think that he wouldn't have to do that because he hasn't really paid anything for his money. That's been paid for by King Charles, and actually he was copying what the Queen, the late Queen, did. And so he was very generous because they were never friends, they never liked each other, and he had a very rich time. But to do that to staff, he was so superior. This is a marvellous example of what a snob and nasty he is. He's not grateful and say, look, here's this small house, please live there and be safe. He just wants the money. I mean, it's too disgusting. He got over £300,000 when he left from Royal Lodge because he wasn't told quickly enough. You know, you have to give a date of when somebody has to leave, and they didn't do that. So that's what he's got, a massive amount of money. So he could have then stopped immediately and given them to the people who are working hard for him, but he didn't do that. It's all grab for himself.
Does any of this surprise you, Angela? You are an extremely experienced royal biographer and journalist. You've written for some of the biggest newspapers in the land. Is this the Andrew that you recognise, someone morally and financially compromised?
I always thought he was awful. For the first time I met him. I haven't met him very often.
Can you tell me about that encounter?
Well, no, he's just very superior to me. He didn't really want to talk to journalists. Oh, my goodness. You know, it was one of those. But, you know, you'll get used to that. But he's not a pleasant man.
Wow.
And I wasn't the type that he would say, would you like to come upstairs? So, you know, he just didn't take much notice of him. I asked a few things. I got a few answers, which I thought I could say. When he said something, I could make him feel a bit of a fool. I managed to do that. And give him lots of compliments.
Well, you could run rings around him intellectually, of course, because he's no brain box, is he?
No, he's no brain box. And he's so busy with himself that you can actually get these things if you quite care for it. And you mustn't let your own feelings take you somewhere else. You know, you just have to get there with the right sort of things.
Angela, do you have any sympathy for King Charles? He's running out of levers to pull. Andrew is no longer Duke of York. He's no longer Prince or a member of the Order of the Garter. There's not too much more his brother can do.
No, he can't, but he might find something because he's having nothing to do with him. When he went in the area, he didn't go anywhere near him. He doesn't want to talk to him. Obviously, Andrew is lonely, but he won't go near him. And he's never liked him. He's never, ever been a close friend because, you know, he was mocked for liking flowers, reading books. And so, you know, he was always downed. And his father and mother preferred him for quite a long while to the king. And, you know, I feel sorry for the king because it's very awkward that he's trying to do his best for all the people and that someone like Andrew messes it up because he's only thinking of himself.
Most definitely. With us in the studio is the brilliant Charlie Rowley, Angela, who is live at 10 a.m. And Charlie, I'd love to know what you think there in terms of what Angela has had to say. The poor king is running out of options to deal with his brother.
Well, you're absolutely right, and Angela's absolutely right. We talk about brothers being Harry and William, having some sort of, you know, difference of approaches to things, but the king and Andrew seem to have taken completely different, roles in life. You know, King Charles, you know, getting on with the job and having, strengthening international relations with the US. Andrew seems to be just grabbing the headlines for all the wrong reasons day after day.
Angela, we love having you on the show. I'm looking forward